Chapter 2150. Soon, Isabel saw the members of the subjugation team that the self-proclaimed vampire hunter D mentioned. At first, she thought that the so-called subjugation team was most likely the people who were dragged into the black mud in the venue. However, she realized that she had underestimated the situation. These people were clearly not the people she knew in the venue. In fact, the members of the subjugation team could not even be called people. One of them was a huge guy wrapped in iron skin. One of them was wearing an evening gown. He was tall and had the head of a Chintian doll. There was also an orange toad with a backpack on its back. There was also a pretty blue bird. The blue bird's tail feathers were like a work of art. Including the indecent D, who kept flirting with her along the way, they were all the members of the subjugation team. This big guy is called Kaz. As for this gentleman, you should call him Mr. Chintian. The toad is called Taramaru. The last one is Mr. Bluebird. Hello. Isabel calmed herself down and greeted them subconsciously. However, the strange members of the subjugation team did not seem to care about Isabel's existence. The Iron Skin Giant, Kaz, asked directly, D, why don't you clean up this infected guy? Isabel knew that the Iron Skin Giant was referring to Asake. However, she could not even protect herself at this time. She could only feel anxious but did not act rashly. D said slowly, this guy seems to be not fully infected. He seems to be able to retain a part of his consciousness. After that, D removed the chain from Asash's mouth. The fangs in Mr. Asash's mouth were gone. Although his eyes were still red, his expression was still calm. This guy has been awake since just now. He just hasn't spoken. D chuckled. Don't you think that such an infected person will be very popular in the city of God's blessing? Mr. Chintian thought for a while and said, those guys in the Holy Sea's Holy Research Institute will like it, right? D smiled and looked at Asakes. Then, swear in the name of a vampire hunter. Tell me who infected you, and we will ensure your safety. Mr. Asakes remained silent. Just as D had said, he had woken up a long time ago. He had been like this for half a year. He would suddenly become bloodthirsty, but he would soon wake up. As for the D before him, Asakes had the same doubts as Isabel. Apart from looking like a playboy, how could they be so similar? No, it was as if they were made from the same mold. However, Asakes had been exposed to a lot of strange things recently, so he was able to accept it. This guy doesn't look very clear-headed. Iron Giant Kaz shook his head. I feel that it will be troublesome to bring him along. Those lunatics from the Saint Research Institute might not like it either. He is in the room at the bottom of this place, Asake said suddenly. Everyone looked at him in unison, only to see Mr. Arthashes quickly say, about half a year ago, I accidentally entered this place. After I was bitten by that guy, I was left in the castle to fend for myself. I have no way to leave this place. I even lose my mind every time because of that guy's actions. Asakes. Isabel subconsciously called out Asash's name. However, she was quickly interrupted by Asake. Asakes. My name is Asakes. This person is called Isa. She is my distant cousin. The members of the subjugation team looked at each other. At this time, D smiled slightly and said, since this Mr. Asamu knows where that guy is, it will probably save us a lot of time. You just said that if that guy does anything, it will affect you, right? Yes. I am sure that guy has already woken up. Otherwise, my reaction wouldn't be so strong. Asakes nodded. In the past, I would feel very uncomfortable, but I could still barely hold on. However, when that guy pays attention to me, I can't resist. That guy, why did he leave you in the castle? Tarangmaru, who had been silent all this time, was puzzled. According to our information, the target of this hunt is a guy who never leaves anyone alive. Perhaps it is because of his uniqueness. Bluebird said slowly, Just like how those guys from the Saint Research Institute are interested in him, the target of the infected might also be interested in those who are still conscious after being infected by him. I can accept this inference. Mr. Qingtian nodded and then said calmly, "Then, let's get ready. The guest has been here for a long time." "True." Dee chuckled. He waved his hand and a sword light instantly appeared. The sword light even illuminated the surroundings. In the end, it directly hit a pillar and cut it in half. Isabel's eyes narrowed. She knew that Dee not only liked to flirt with girls, but he was also responsible for acting cool in the subjugation team. However, the shadow of a huge bat had already appeared. The entire ceiling was covered by the shadow of this bat. As for Dee, he had already charged forward with his sword. He crashed into the black shadow and tangled with it at a speed faster than ordinary people. Why don't you go and help him?" Isabel couldn't help but frown. She found that the other guys in the subjugation team were just standing by and watching. Dee alone is enough to deal with this kind of vampire. Isabel only felt a slight weight on her shoulder. It was Mr. Bluebird, who was already standing on her shoulder. "If even Dee can't deal with it, it's useless even if we go up together." She really wanted to complain. "Then, what's the use of this subjugation team?" "You will know soon," Mr. Bluebird suddenly said. "Soon?" Isabel froze and looked at Asakes subconsciously. However, Asakes shook his head slightly, signaling her to wait and see. At this moment, a sharp cry suddenly sounded. It didn't come from the shadow of the bat, but from Dee. After the sharp whistling sound, Dee's hair instantly grew long, and his clothes were torn apart. A pair of huge bat wings popped out from his back that was covered with dense scars. He even bared his fangs and gave up his long sword. Instead, he fought with his sharp fingernails. 10 seconds. "Get ready," Iron Hide said in a deep voice. At this moment, the eyes of the members of the subjugation team turned solemn. 10 seconds passed by quickly. The battle between Dee and the shadow came to an end at an incredible speed. It was like a dream and a massacre. When Isabel came back to her senses, the battle was already over. Dee stood in the rubble after the battle while holding the head of a pale-faced young man in each of his hands. At the same time, the members of the subjugation team instantly moved out. In an instant, they landed on the four corners of Dee. At the same time, they reached out and grabbed Dee's hands and body. In the end, they took out a syringe from their backpack and directly pierced it into Dee's heart to end the fight. Dee had recovered his appearance and was lying on the back of Terangmer. However, dawn hadn't arrived yet. He had indeed ended the battle before dawn. This guy. Isabel didn't dare to get too close to the members of the subjugation team. They seemed to be used to this. Mr. Qingtian suddenly appeared behind Isabel. Dee is the only guy in the world who survived the true ancestor of vampires. However, since then, he has been cursed by the true ancestor. Sooner or later, he will become a bloodthirsty monster. Why are you telling me this? Isabel frowned. First, it's because you saw it all. Second, it's because... Mr. Qingtian paused with a mysterious expression. Isabel couldn't help but feel nervous. Let's do it again. It's not a secret to begin with, Mr. Fairsky said with a smile. Everyone in God Bless City knows about this. Unreliable. Unreliable. The members of the subjugation team were unreliable no matter how they looked at it. They had left the castle. After half a year, Asakes finally saw the sun outside again. According to him, it was a little dazzling, and he felt a slight burning sensation all over his body. However, he gritted his teeth and endured it. The members of the subjugation team couldn't help but click their tongues in amazement. Other than Dee, Asakes was the first person they knew who could remain conscious to a certain extent after being infected. If that's the case, can you let me go? No way. Who knows if it's because of your cunning? Iron Giant Kaz shook his head. Mr. Asakes didn't want to live anymore. At this moment, he was trapped in the belly of the iron giant. He thought Kaz was a guy wearing a huge iron armor, but he didn't expect Kaz to be the huge iron armor itself. A huge walking iron armor? Okay, the people from the Holy See are here. A huge airship appeared in the sky and slowly descended. The wind started to mess up Isabel's hair. She looked at the crimson sky with a complicated expression. This was a world with vampires and a group of hunters who hunted vampires for survival. A guy who was cursed by the true ancestor of vampires and would eventually become a bloodthirsty monster. His only wish in life was to find the true curse of vampires. She didn't know what would happen next. Isabel couldn't help but fall into a huge dilemma. Stand up and salute. Class dismissed. When Ludic opened his eyes, he saw some familiar scenes. This was no doubt a classroom. The students were all 16 or 17 years old. Although their clothes were different, most schools had a similar atmosphere. This atmosphere was especially obvious to him as an educator. Ludic nodded silently and walked out of the classroom. He felt that he had adapted well. But what was going on? He walked aimlessly in the corridor of the teaching building. The teachers and students he met would greet him. He also knew that his name was Ludic, and he seemed to be a math teacher. But what was going on? Suddenly, an ear-piercing buzzing sound was heard. It seemed to be some kind of alarm, but it shouldn't be a fire. Just as Ludic was feeling puzzled, he saw the teachers and students in the corridor become extremely nervous in an instant. All students, go to the nearest classroom immediately. Don't stay in any open space. The impact will arrive in 30 seconds. I repeat, all students. Seeing that although the teachers and students were panicking, they still hid in the classroom in an orderly manner, Ludic was confused. Impact? Bang bang bang. The windows in the corridor, at this time, crazily dropped the iron gate, and the entire corridor was completely closed in an instant, and the corridor turned into the dark red emergency light at this time. In addition, Ludic was the only one left. He actually wanted to go to the nearby classroom, but unfortunately, the nearby classroom had dropped the iron gate at this time, or it was more appropriate to call it a heavy steel plate. This was the conclusion he reached after knocking on the iron gate. At this time, a crazy vibration came, and Ludic was suddenly shaken to the floor. He had to lean against the floor to stabilize his body. But the glass on the corridor window had been shattered. He had to hold his head to prevent himself from being hurt by the glass. This vibration lasted for about a minute before it finally stopped. Ludic subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief and slowly got up. That is, at the corridor window, there was an iron gate at this time. At this time, a corner was indeed pried open. Ludic subconsciously approached the gap and looked at the outside world through the small gap. Outside there were two huge figures impressively. They were far taller than the buildings in the city. One of them was a huge humanoid armored machine, and the other had a hard shell with a strange shape like a combination of a clock and an octopus. They were crazily fighting each other at this time. What the hell is this? Ludic's pupils contracted for a while. That monster is called Emissary by the people here. This should be the 97th impact, that is to say, this is the 97th emissary. An old voice suddenly sounded behind Ludic. As for the giant fighting with the emissary, it is called Song Lei. Teacher. Calvin? Ludic looked at the old man behind him for a while with astonishment. At this time, the old man indifferently said, "Here, you should call me Principal Calvin. By the way, the driver who is now driving Song Lei is also one of the students of this school." Outside, the battle between the huge machine named Song Lei and the 97th emissary easily destroyed the buildings in the city. But Ludic didn't have time to pay attention to the battle. He just frowned. "Calvin? Principal, I think you have a lot to say to me? Follow me first," Calvin slowly said. "Let's go to a more suitable place to watch the battle." Ludic nodded silently. He followed behind Calvin. He was very patient and didn't take the initiative to ask at this time. At this time, Grand Scholar Calvin slowly said, "The place we are now in is a world inside the book called Book of Gaia." The world inside the book? Although it is a book. But do you think it is different from reality? Calvin shook his head and said, "There is no difference. If you die here, it is also a real death." Huang? I'm afraid she is not the real Huang, but someone who borrowed the identity of Huang. Grand Scholar Calvin was silent for a moment before he sighed and said, "Morrigan." Morrigan? Ludic frowned and said, "Who is this?" "Strictly speaking, this is a god," the scholar of Calvin said. Ludic frowned again and said, "God? As far as I know, there is no one called Morrigan in the 7 capitals." At this time, Grand Scholar Calvin walked into the elevator and waited for Ludic to enter at the same time. Then, he walked in as well. The elevator began to climb up. Soon, the elevator climbed to a place where it was not blocked by the iron gate, but it was still climbing. At this time, Ludic realized that this school had an extremely tall tower. Because she does not belong to the 7 capitals. She is not a god of the 7 capitals, nor is she a god of the kingdom of heaven, which is above the entire holy light kingdom. Calvin looked at the battle in the city outside and slowly said, "She is an outer god." An outer god? Outside of the kingdom of heaven, there is a divine system called the Celtic. Grand Scholar Calvin thought for a while and said, "Morrigan has many divine positions in the divine system, and the most powerful of them is the one who controls death." Ludic thought about it according to Grand Scholar Calvin's words. Why is an outer god in the Holy Light Kingdom? It is very simple. Grand Scholar Calvin said, "Capture the outer god and then put her in the Holy Light Kingdom. Let the outer god live as a believer as soon as she is born. Isn't the faith of a god more abundant than the faith of an ordinary person?" Ludic suddenly widened his eyes. "This is really something. The return rate is so high that it can make people commit crimes. You are still the same as always, a crazy guy." Grand Scholar Calvin shook his head and said, "Then, do you know how the Celtic divine system was destroyed? It can't be that it went out of control, right?" Ludic shrugged and said, "It was destroyed by our saint." Grand Scholar Calvin said slowly, "It was destroyed by our saint, the saint of our city of freedom." Chapter 2151. Basically, Ludic was listening to the story as if it was a story. This history was told by the Calvinist scholars and had never appeared in any of the current documents. Because of that, it meant that this story had no foundation at all. Even though Ludic had already fallen into this strange environment, he still felt a strong sense of being pulled away from it. He forced himself to walk into the history told by Scholar Calvin, multitasking. "Teacher, according to what you're saying, the current predicament we're in is actually the revenge of this outer god named Kerrigan." Ludic frowned as he connected what he had seen and experienced recently. Holy Fall. The waters of Holy Fall are very deep. Scholar Calvin shook his head gently. "I'm afraid it's not as simple as you think, but it obviously has something to do with Kerrigan." "We won," Ludic suddenly said. A large area of the city outside the huge academy had been destroyed into ruins. The huge machine called Song Lei stood in the ruins. Only half of its arm was left, and its body was severely injured. The 97th emissary was finally defeated. This was undoubtedly a fierce battle. "We won." Scholar Calvin nodded and said indifferently, "But the pilot of Song Lei is almost done for." Ludic was stunned. "You just said that the pilot is a student of this academy?" Calvin said, "The academy you're currently in is one of the 3 academies in the world that specializes in training pilots of combat machines like Song Lei. Otherwise, why do you think an ordinary academy would have so many defensive measures?" Indeed, from where he was now, the entire academy was not only wrapped up like an iron bucket, but there were also many large defensive cannons everywhere in the academy. This was very abnormal. "Teacher, why are you here? Why are you the principal here?" Ludic asked coldly. And why am I here? This is a random event. Scholar Calvin thought for a while and said, except for Kerrigan, who controls the Book of Gaia, everything that happens to anyone who enters the Book of Gaia can be said to be random events or events arranged by Kerrigan. 2 possibilities? Ludic opened his mouth in surprise. Immediately, his heart moved. You mean, this outer god actually can't completely control this strange Book of Gaia? Scholar Calvin looked deeply at Ludic and suddenly said, if you can concentrate on one thing, you are actually the person who can inherit my legacy. Ludic shook his head. Teacher, you are too poor. Even if I inherit everything you have, it won't last even a minute. Spiritual wealth is the most precious treasure in the world. But I can't eat enough. Ludic shrugged and said, even if you have always been an ascetic, you still need to eat, drink, and sleep. Without these, you would have died on the streets. Any dream that is discussed without the foundation of material foundation is like a computer screen. It's just self-comforting. Scholar Calvin was not angry. If he was angry because of this, he would have vomited blood and died when he was teaching Ludic. Ludic shook his head. So, teacher, why are you so clear about all this? Even in my family, there are no records of these things. Scholar Calvin sighed and said, all this is because of one person. Who is it this time? Ludic rolled his eyes. Master Marianne, Scholar Calvin said softly. Marianne. Ludic was silent for a while. Then, he slowly said, is she the person that you kidnapped me and Asakes back then? So you do know something. Scholar Calvin looked at him deeply. Ludic said calmly, I'm not that naive guy Asakes. I won't believe you unconditionally. Don't you know how many times I've been tricked by you in the past? Actually, our Theses has matured a lot. Scholar Calvin shook his head and said, the impact is over. As the person in charge of this school, I can't leave my post for too long. If you have anything to say, wait until nightfall. I'll come to you again. You can digest what I've said. After that, Scholar Calvin drove the elevator away quickly. Ludic couldn't help but squint his eyes. He muttered, you old bastard. Tell me, what should I do before nightfall? Ludic shook his head and looked at the huge broken machine that stood motionless in the ruins of the city. Some things that looked like small planes were quickly approaching the broken Songlei. They were probably busy. Ludic lowered his head and took out a necklace from his collar. There was a teardrop-like pendant on it. He muttered, although I've changed my clothes, I still have this thing. Holy glory. This was the heirloom of the Mother of Saints family. However, there was another holy glory in our Theses' body. Only when the 2 holy glory were gathered together would it. But Asakes can't be in this world, right? Ludic shook his head. Just as he was about to put the pendant into his collar, a faint heat came from the holy glory pendant. Ludic was stunned. This meant that it could sense the existence of the other holy glory, which meant that Asakes couldn't be far away from him. At this moment, a huge light suddenly appeared in the sky above the ruins of the city. A beam of light was cast on the ground. It instantly annihilated the Songlei and the rescue team that was about to be retrieved. Many parts of the city were even flattened. Some of them even extended to the periphery of the school. The strong shock wave even directly flipped Ludic to the ground. He held on to the guardrail tightly. He saw that a huge whirlpool had appeared in the sky above the destroyed city. And in the whirlpool, there seemed to be a small figure slowly descending. The sound of the school alarm rang in his ears. Attention! Attention! A new shock wave has been detected. Attention! Attention! A new shock wave has been detected. A box that looked like a mobile phone fell out from Ludic's body. The box that landed on the ground opened automatically and many projection interfaces popped up. Ludic was stunned. This was probably something that the people in this world, or at least the people who were teachers in the school, brought along with them. However, the image that popped up was the image of the huge whirlpool. The image was the full appearance of the figure that was slowly descending. This guy, isn't he? In the palm of his hand there was a slight heat. Mr. Essex seemed to be holding something tightly. At this moment, he was sitting on a single bed. The room was very narrow. It was a place that looked like a confinement room. This was the shelter of the Holy See in the City of God Blessed. Ever since he was brought back to the City of God Blessed by the crusading team, he was directly locked up in this place. It had been 3 days. In these 3 days, he couldn't get any communication with the outside world. Footsteps were heard. Essex instantly put away the item in his hand. Then, he closed his eyes and lay on the bed. Asa! Assam! Essex instantly opened his eyes. It was Isabel's voice. Hearing this, he immediately sat up and looked at Isabel, who was outside the iron fence. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face. It seems that you've been living well for the past few days. Isabel rolled her eyes. It's not easy to come and see you. I spent a lot of effort these few days to apply for permission to visit you. Mr. Essex stopped smiling and said seriously, What's the situation now? I feel like I'm going to be dissected and studied by those fellows who call themselves the Holy Research Institute. There are still many things that I don't understand about this place. Don't expect too much from me. Isabel quickly said, however, in the near future, there might be a chance to rescue you. What do you mean? Isabel whispered, I observed that the City of God Blessed has been on high alert these few days. It seems like they are guarding against something. I have a feeling that a powerful enemy is coming. A powerful enemy? Do you know where it came from? Mr. Essex quickly asked. Isabel shook her head. I don't know much. However, D suddenly came to me today and gave me something that looked like a plane ticket. He should be asking me to leave. The situation doesn't seem to be optimistic. Essex looked at Isabel from head to toe and said coldly, He gave you a plane ticket to leave? Looks like you've spent a lot of effort these few days. Isabel said calmly, I only had a few meals with that guy. He enjoyed the time when we were dating, but he never really touched me. Doesn't that sound strange? Essex pondered for a while before saying, This is one of the main bases of the humans against the vampires. It's the only city blessed by God in the world, and it's an existence that can make the Holy See here feel as if they're facing a great enemy. For to be so abnormal, could the enemy this time be? The one who cursed him, the vampire's true ancestor. Isabel's heart skipped a beat. Essex suddenly said, Isabel, come closer and put your hand in. I have something to give you. Isabel frowned. After hesitating for a while, she put her hand in. What do you want to give me? Essex instantly grabbed Isabel's wrist. I want to give you a bad memory. As she spoke, Isabel felt a sharp pain coming from her wrist. Arthursis had bitten her wrist. She was shocked and angry. She shouted angrily, Essex, you bastard! What are you doing? Let me go! She struggled for a while and finally managed to pull her arm back. However, her arm had been bitten. Blood covered half of her palm. She could not help but stare at Essex with hatred. At this time, his mouth was full of blood. His eyes were slightly narrowed. After a while, he slowly exhaled and returned to normal. Okay, it should be enough. You deliberately sucked my blood. Isabel seemed to have thought of something. Essex shrugged. After all, if I keep starving, I can't do anything. Although I'm a strange infected, I'm still an infected. I still have some strange abilities. As he spoke, Arthursis reached out and gripped the iron bars tightly. As he exerted force, the iron bars bent slightly, but Arthursis didn't continue. Instead, he straightened the iron bars again. He said in a low voice, Wait until night, when they are not so alert. Isabel gritted her teeth and nodded. Then, she angrily hid the wound with her sleeve. I'll settle this with you slowly. Remia curled up in a corner and stared blankly at the fire. It was snowing outside the city. According to Azzy, this type of snowstorm would last for at least a few days. In other words, she would need to hide in this underground tunnel for a few days. Lo. Z, do you know why this world has become like this? Remia's voice slowly rang out in the silence. Z was leaning against the wall, using the light from the fire to read a rather old book. Z closed the book and said slowly, "That's true. Why did this world become like this? From the records left behind by humans, this should be a clear blue world in the past." You don't know either? Remia opened her mouth. Z shook her head. I didn't personally experience it. However, from the records, it seems that humans in the past chose the path of destruction. Humans chose. Remia shook her head. Why would we choose to destroy ourselves? Z said indifferently, perhaps we can find the answer in the future. Just as Remia was about to ask something, a slight tremor came from the depths of the tunnel. Remia's heart immediately tensed up. As the vibration grew stronger, heavy footsteps sounded. Remia immediately picked up the bloodstained sword and looked at Z nervously. Maybe it's a monster. Maybe it's because of the fire. Maybe it's because of our smell. Don't be nervous. Z smiled and said, My friends are back. P friends? Friends I met on the way. Z nodded. They accompanied me and searched for my past. They are all very good guys. Remia subconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. At least, it wasn't a monster. Z's friends should be good people too. At least Z was the same as Mr. Luo, the type that could make people feel at ease. Z, bad luck, bad luck. This damn place is barren. I can't find any useful supplies. I'm afraid you'll have to starve for a few days. A coarse voice rang out, and Remia's attention was immediately drawn to the source of the voice. As the sound got closer and closer, what appeared in front of Remia was a gigantic figure walking with a bent back. The firelight finally shone on this figure. Armor. Remia's eyes widened. They saw that the person who was walking with his back bent was a guy wearing heavy iron armor. His huge body almost filled the entire cross-section of the pipe. But on the other hand, it also gave people a sense of safety. After all, in a place where monsters ran rampant, this armor seemed to have quite a lot of defensive power. But soon, Remia lost her composure. Because she saw a guy with the head of Qingtian doll. There was also a big toad that could talk, and a bluebird that could talk as well. This is cats. This is Qingtian doll, Taramaru and Bluebird. Z smiled and introduced. They are good friends I met on the way. Remia realized that she was wrong. Z's friend couldn't even be considered human. There was a door in front of the door. In the long tunnel, this door was the final destination. Boss Luo stood in front of the final destination door. After sizing it up, he slowly pushed the door open. Then, he appeared in a small and exquisite girl's room. There were all kinds of fantasies that a cute girl should have. There was a sketchbook on the table with some drafts on it. Boss Luo picked it up and glanced at it. It was confirmed that it was an erotic manga. Boss Luo blinked and the door of the room was opened. A girl in a small skirt rushed in and snatched the sketchbook from Boss Luo's hands. Her face was red. You sneaked into my room again. You big bad brother. While Boss Luo was stunned, a smile soon appeared on his face, and he said with a smile, Good drawing. When the young girl heard this, she immediately let out a strange cry. Then, she ran to the bed and covered her entire body with a cup. She cried out loudly, Get out! Get out! Get out! There was no movement for a long time. The girl tentatively poked her head out of the blanket. She was the only one left in the room. She looked at the drafts in her sketchbook with annoyance. Her face was as red as fire and she was about to cry. I shouldn't have drawn this kind of theme. Chapter 2152. It was a quiet town in front of him. The building was not tall, and it seemed to be a type of thinking that as long as it was enough, it was fine. But in the distance, he could see a thin film that was flowing like a bubble. The entire edge of the town was covered by this thin film. This film seemed to be expanding outward at a very slow speed. At the edge of the town, he could even see half of the building. As the film expanded outward, The half of the building was gradually completed. Boss Luo was now at home, at least on the balcony of this home, overlooking all this happening. It's not finished yet. Ring. It was the phone ringing from the living room. Luochu picked up the phone, only to hear a woman's voice. Hello, is this Luoya's home? Hearing this, Boss Luo was silent for a moment and then said, Yes, you are. Hello, I'm Luoya's class teacher at school. The man on the phone said seriously, Are you Luoya's parent? Luochu glanced at the house casually. There seemed to be only traces of two people living here. He thought for a while, and then answered the question of the man who claimed to be her class teacher. I'm her brother, and maybe her current guardian. Maybe? What's the matter with Luoya? Luochu directly changed the topic. The man who claimed to be her class teacher said, Well, about some problems of Luoya at school, if possible, I hope to communicate with you, Mr. Luo. What time would be convenient? Do you need me to come to school? No need. If it's possible, let's meet outside in the evening, okay? The woman said softly, If parents are called to school, it may bring unnecessary psychological pressure to students. Boss Luo smiled. Teacher, you really love students. If it's convenient, how about we meet next to the station at 5:30 p.m.? This is my phone number, you can write it down. Luochu directly wrote down the phone number left by the class teacher in the notebook, and confirmed the time and place of the meeting. The call was cut off, and the door of the room opened slightly, revealing half of the girl's face. The girl hesitantly asked, Who called? A salesman. Luochu smiled. He asked me if I want to buy a house. The girl said, Oh, and then directly closed the door. But outside the door, the girl's voice came again. Tonight? What do you want to eat tonight? Luochu approached the door. What do you want to eat? Anything. Boss Luo smiled. Then I'll buy some ingredients you. Do you want to go out together? No response. Luochu waited for a while, but there was still no sound in the room. He blinked and left the room. Until the door was closed, the girl opened the door a little and poked her head out to look around. After confirming that there was no one else in the house, she slowly walked out of the room. The girl was still covered with a quilt, and she rushed to the refrigerator, took out some food and drinks, and quickly rushed back to the room. Then she closed the door. Then she opened the door again, hung a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door lock, and then closed the door again. Or perhaps it should be said that they had met each other on the road for their own purposes and traveled together. Z was looking for lost memories and a very important person. As for the Iron Man Kaz, it was said that he was looking for a companion like him. Remia later found out that Kaz's big armor was hollow, and Kaz was the armor itself. Taramaru was looking for a legendary food, and Mr. Qingtian hoped to find a way to become an adult. As for the blue bird, it said that it was looking for its hometown, but it could not say where it was. They were all strange creatures, but Remia thought that in this world where monsters were rampant and humans were rare, Az's group was strange, but at least they were not scary. Remia, are you looking for your brother too? Kaz looked a little scary, but surprisingly, he was a talkative person. If it's possible. Remia nodded. Kaz directly announced, In that case, do you want to travel with us? Remia was startled. In this desolate world, she really needed companions, but she looked blankly at Z, the only one who could give her a sense of security, and asked hesitantly, Can I? Z said softly, Can't you? Remia was startled. She suddenly felt like crying, but she nodded silently. Mr. Qingtian came in front of Remia, performed a magic trick, and gave the flower in his hand to Remia. Is it made of paper? Remia asked in surprise. Mr. Qingtian said, I heard that this kind of flower could be seen everywhere in the old world. I don't know what kind of flower this is, but I saw this picture on a wall in another city, so I folded it out of paper. This is a rose flower, Remia suddenly said. Rose flower, at the same time, was also the word of Freedom City. It was the symbol of Freedom City as Saint. As one of the 7 cities of Freedom City, there was no one who did not know of it. Roseflower, so this is what it is called. Mr. Fairski seemed to have found something that piqued his interest, and immediately asked Remia for more information about this flower. This seemed to have opened up a topic, a chance for Remia to join this group. In the snowstorm, they hid in the narrow but warm environment, whispering their own stories until they fell asleep. Sri Lankan Combat Academy. This was the name of one of the 3 schools in the world that specialized in training giant combat humanoid pilots. In Principal Calvin's office, Ludic was eating instant noodles in big mouthfuls. He had been hungry for half a day. Because he was not familiar with everything here, Ludic had been hiding alone for half a day, fiddling with the communication device in his hand, and learned a lot about this world. The main reason was that Freedom City followed the path of modern civilization, so it was not that different from this world. He was not completely unable to adapt. Who is this person? Ludic suddenly asked. On the projection screen in the office, a series of images appeared. This was the figure that appeared in the giant vortex after the 97th emissary was eliminated during the day. Different from the emissary in the past, the emissary that appeared after the 98th emissary had a human appearance. The 98th emissary on the screen had the appearance of a young man with black hair and black eyes. However, under the man's eyes there was a teardrop tattoo that looked like a teardrop, and he looked unusually cold. The 98th emissary appeared one after another, which made the entire world's defense system nervous. However, after the 98th emissary appeared after the 98th emissary, it did not cause any damage, and after he appeared, he quickly disappeared and went to civilization. However, the destruction caused by the 98th emissary was horrifying. Half of the city was turned into ruins in an instant, and even the underground shelter of the city was not spared. The Defense Force temporarily named this new emissary as Zero. Scholar Calvin thought for a while and said, "It means that this type of emissary has appeared for the first time. This kind of emissary has never appeared before?" Scholar Calvin shook his head and said, "Because of this, the Defense Force is highly nervous. I estimate that in another hour, the reinforcements from the ground should be almost here. Next, this place may become the first line of defense." Ludic frowned and said, "The so-called Defense Force that you are talking about, does it mean that this emissary, with the code name Zero, is still somewhere in this city? At least, they have not detected the energy field fluctuations of the emissary outside of here." Scholar Calvin nodded and said, "But in our city, the energy field fluctuations of the emissary are getting stronger and stronger, and it has even far surpassed the highest level. Then why are we not running away?" Ludic was surprised and said, "That kind of guy who can destroy half of the city with a wave of his hand, how are we going to resist? With our heads? We can't leave." Scholar Calvin shook his head and said, "Because this guy is very likely to be the protagonist of this world." Protagonist? The Book of Gaia is a very magical book. Every page of it is a huge world. Scholar Calvin said in a deep voice, "Only by finding the protagonist of the page world can we find a way to leave this place." Ludic was silent for a while and said, "Teacher, it seems that you still have a lot of things that you haven't told me. I'll tell you slowly." Scholar Calvin said, "Because this time you can no longer stay out of this. But before that, I need you to do something for me." "A condition?" Ludic rolled his eyes and said helplessly, "Okay, what is it?" "I need that special ability of yours," Scholar Calvin said coldly. Ludic did not seem to hear him. He lowered his head and ate his instant noodles quietly. Scholar Calvin did not care and continued, "Although we have entered the world of the page world, in fact, the things that we have will not disappear. For example, our cognition, knowledge, ideas, and even some special abilities. Your ability." Ludic picked up a piece of shrimp and said in surprise, "This kind of instant noodles is very expensive." Do you know how to do business? The pilot of Utsonglei was found later. Scholar Calvin said directly, before the impact, the pilot successfully launched the cockpit and escaped, but he was seriously injured. I need you to save the pilot. What can I get? Ludic looked up. Teacher, what you are going to tell me is not enough. What else do you want to know? Scholar Calvin asked indifferently. Answer me. Ludic stared at Scholar Calvin and said slowly, Answer me. Teacher, you know all of this, you know about the existence of Morrigan and you know about the Book of Gaius. Were you once an outer god? Scholar Calvin was silent for a while, then he sighed. He took out a card from the drawer and pushed it in front of Ludic. This is a communication card. After you go out, someone will take you to the treatment room. As for whether I am an outer god or not, have you forgotten my religion? Teacher, isn't this answer very cunning? If I'm not cunning, I can't be a good teacher for a bad student like you. Scholar Calvin shook his head. Remember, in this world, the only one you can trust is me. Similarly, the only one I can rely on is you. Ludic walked out of Scholar Calvin's office without saying a word. He followed the instructions and came to the designated place. A transport vehicle had been waiting there for a long time. Excuse me, are you the doctor that Principal Calvin said can save people, Mr. Ludic? At this time, a head popped out of the transport vehicle and looked at Ludic. However, Ludic did not feel good. What did he see? What he saw was a guy with the head of a teru bozo. Was that guy wearing a mask? 7 dwarfs. Oh no, they were 7 fierce and hungry bearded dwarfs. At this time, they were eating a big wild boar that had just been roasted. The girl looked at them and did not have the slightest appetite. Although at this time, her body did feel hungry. At this time, the bearded dwarf's eldest brother suddenly said, Your Highness, I just asked outside. The Queen gave the order to enter the forest to search for us. There are posters of our arrest everywhere in the city. The young girl casually grunted in acknowledgement, looking as if she lacked interest. The bearded dwarf did not understand the atmosphere and continued to say, I heard that the one leading the army this time is the leader of the kingdom's knights, Balaam. Sigh. That guy is really difficult to deal with. He can block my wolf fawn club with his bare hands. The girl suddenly frowned. What did you say? What is the leader of the knights called? Balaam, the bearded dwarf said, Your Highness, is your brain still not recovered? The girl ignored him and muttered something under her breath. Balaam? Balaam? Immediately, the girl stood up and walked out of the house. The bearded dwarf hurriedly asked, Your Highness, where are you going? To enter the city, the girl said calmly. I want to meet the leader of the knights. The bearded dwarf was shocked. You can't, Your Highness. Your brain is still not recovered. You can't use those harmful witchcraft. You can't deal with Balaam. As he spoke, the bearded dwarf quickly reached out to grab the girl's shoulder. But the moment he was about to grab her, he suddenly felt the world spinning. When he came back to his senses, the bearded dwarf's eldest brother was already lying on the ground. One of his arms was broken. Please don't touch me, the girl said coldly. If this happens again, you might only be able to eat with your feet in the future. Hearing this, the big bearded dwarf brother was not angry. Instead, he got up excitedly. That's great. She's back. Her Highness the Princess is back. That's the smell, that's the expression that kills without batting an eyelid. It's Her Highness. This is great. Yes. Her Highness' brain is fine. It's finally fine. Looking at the 7 bearded dwarves dancing with joy and tears in their eyes, the girl sighed and held her forehead. Hashtag PS. 2 halves. Chapter 2153. Screams of despair sounded. People covered their mouths in fear, and even covered their eyes. In the sky above the Holy Maiden ceremony, there were only a few floating crosses, but now there were nearly 10 of them. On each of the crosses there was a young girl who had died horribly. Those were the candidates for the Holy Maiden ceremony. Every Holy Maiden candidate was once the hope of many people. Watching their hopes shatter before their very eyes was like torture. Even if they didn't support those girls who were crucified, it was still an extremely infuriating thing to watch these young girls die tragically. Stop. Stop this ceremony. Stop. I told you to stop. The angry people in the Freedom City started to charge at the Holy Maiden ceremony. The guards outside the Holy Maiden ceremony gave up on stopping them and hid in a corner. However, when the people charged into the Holy Maiden ceremony, they were scared away by the black sludge that covered the entire place. The bubbling, slow-moving sludge was like black lava, emitting a strong and ominous aura, making people feel intimidated and unable to move forward. Holy Maiden, do you really want us to watch them die one by one? How cruel is this? If this is a preparation for the revival of the Holy Maiden ceremony, then this revival day, this revival day, this revival day. Shut up! Shut up! Heresy! The negative emotions that had been suppressed due to the appearance of the Holy Fall now seemed to be on the verge of uncontrollable. In the Freedom City, the sky was gloomy, and the bustling scene was no longer there. This city is getting worse and worse. The car slowly drove on the road, and people rioting due to anger and fear could be seen everywhere. Lavar's expression became more and more serious, but Robert, who was in the passenger seat, didn't seem to see it. At least Robert looked so calm. Robert calmly said, "You think it's bad because you haven't seen anything worse." Lavar couldn't help but ask, "What is worse?" Robert slowly said, "In some places where there is a lack of faith, the flames of war are endless and corpses can cover the rivers. In order to survive, people will even eat their own offspring. Natural disasters, man-made disasters, and even hope seem to have given up on them. There is no such place in the 7 capitals." Laval shook his head and said with certainty. Robert didn't argue. Instead, he suddenly said, "Let's get out of the car and leave. Unless you're willing to knock down the crowd on the road, we won't be able to reach our destination even if it's dark." Laval had no choice but to stop the car on the road. He squeezed into the crowd with Robert and moved forward with difficulty while looking at the screen of his phone. The options that suddenly appeared on the special broadcast channel of the Holy Maiden ceremony didn't only include options for the Holy Maiden candidates, but also other options. Those who were also present at the ceremony. Among them, there was the option of Ludwig's headmaster. They knew what had happened. Everything that had happened to the people who had disappeared from the venue. "Is there any way to contact them?" Laval suddenly asked. He felt that Robert might be able to give him an answer. Robert replied, but it sounded very perfunctory. "Only faith can reach it." Faith? Wasn't the faith of the entire Free City not enough? How desperately they wanted to end this nightmare. In the Crayon Kingdom, Yulia decided to call this place the Crayon Kingdom. At this moment, Yulia was looking for the Carrot Sword hero with Charmin and the Matchstick doll who could deal with the Rabbit Demon King. They were cursed by the Rabbit Demon King, and carrots started to grow on their bodies. As a stickman, Charmin looked fine, but senior sister Yulia felt that something was wrong. This was because the carrots brought about by the curse were always growing in some strange places on her body. They witnessed the villagers sacrificing Duo Air, who had pulled out the Carrot Sword hero, to the Rabbit Demon King. The Rabbit Demon King glared at them, and they were cursed by the Rabbit Demon King. Later, senior sister Yulia directly kidnapped a Matchstick Man villager and brought him back. After a series of strange interrogation, she obtained the method to remove the curse. Moreover, she took a strange seed from the villager's house. This was the key to finding the Carrot Sword hero. It was because the Carrot Sword hero was planted. However, before the Carrot Sword hero could be planted, they had to find the fairy on the Godly Mountain. Only the fairy gave them the orange juice that could make the seed sprout. Fortunately, traveling in the crayon kingdom seemed to be easy. After the background of the crayon painting changed, they arrived at the foot of the godly mountain. It's really capricious. Yulia couldn't help but complain, it feels like the work of a naughty child. Senior Yulia, look. What is that? At this moment, the matchstick doll Charmin exclaimed, the mountain is moving. Yulia froze for a moment, and her expression changed slightly. Then, she picked up the matchstick doll Charmin and ran as fast as her life depended on it. It wasn't a mountain. It was a giant the size of a mountain. It had a lot of moss on its body. It seemed to be a giant wearing huge armor. If you want to go up the godly mountain, you have to pass 4 tests. I'm the guardian of the first test, Mr. Katz. At the same time, a deafening roar sounded. Yulia, who was running as fast as she could while carrying the matchstick doll Charmin, blinked and stopped. What test? At this moment the armored giant stopped, or rather, it squatted down. Even so, the giant's body was still incomparably large. When Senior Yulia stood there, she was the size of an ant. Answer one of my questions. If your answer is correct, you can go to the second test. Why don't you ask first? Senior Sister Yulia said tentatively. The giant asked, who is the fairy's favorite person? Senior Sister Yulia blinked her eyes and subconsciously said, I know who your fairy is. Who is she? If you can't answer, you'll be punished. After saying that, the giant used its fingers to pick up Yulia. Yulia struggled a few times, but she couldn't break free. How is this possible? Atomization shouldn't be immune to physical attacks. But seeing the giant's fingers start to exert force, squeezing her body so hard that it felt like it was going to explode, Yulia didn't have time to think too much. She could only brace herself and say, Wait, I want to answer. I want to answer. Speak. What's the answer? Yulia didn't know who the fairy's favorite person was. In this crayon kingdom, she had collected too little information. But according to common logic, perhaps the fairy would like the carrot hero. After all, this was basically the case. Carrot hero? At this moment, the stickman Charmin screamed, Is the answer the carrot hero? Wrong answer. Punishment. With a buzzing sound, the giant's fingers exerted force, and the stickman Charmin was instantly crushed into a stick, dead. F***ck Charmin, you died so miserably. Senior apprentice sister, Yulia, couldn't help but feel her scalp go numb. Although the way the Charmin matchstick man died was the same as the previous duo matchstick man, which was a child's play, senior apprentice sister, Yulia, really felt that the crayon kingdom was terrifying. What's your answer? The giant looked at Yulia again. Yulia subconsciously swallowed her saliva, and her scalp went numb. She felt that the giant's patience was running out, and she wanted to give an answer no matter what. Punishment. Wait. I'll answer. Yulia screamed, but my answer has to be drawn. Okay. The giant nodded in surprise. Hurry up and draw. Yulia was immediately released, but she was still in the giant's hands. The danger was still there. How could she know what to draw? She said she would draw it just to buy herself some time. Hurry up and draw. A crayon and a sketchbook immediately fell in front of Yulia. She shivered and helplessly picked up the tools. Then, she sat on the palm of the hand that had fallen to the ground. After a long time, the crayon drew a short curve on the sketchbook. She tentatively raised her head to look at the giant's reaction, but she saw that the giant didn't react at all. However, his hands began to shrink and in an instant, he half-clenched his fist. Yulia didn't dare to waste any more time, and she frantically drew on the sketchbook. I'm done drawing. This is the answer. After a while, Yulia raised the sketchbook, thinking that she was going to die anyway, so she wanted to die quickly. However, she didn't expect that she would have such a bad start. This was clearly the first stage of her career. The answer is correct. You can go to the second stage. Come on, hurry up, what did you say? However, the giant slowly put Yulia down, and then gradually walked away. Not long after, it sat down, and then became a mountain peak, not moving at all. Yulia looked at the scene in front of her, not knowing what to do. Subconsciously, she glanced at her masterpiece and said in disbelief, "This works?" On the sketchbook, she drew a smiling face with a crayon. It was Boss Luo's face. As for the style of the drawing, it wasn't as crude as the one in the Crayon Kingdom. After all, Yulia was a multi-talented female demon from the academy. I just wanted to give it a try, thinking that the shop owner's indescribable existence might be able to change and interfere with some of the truth, but I didn't expect that. I just casually drew the shop owner's appearance. Senior sister Yulia shivered. You can show your divinity with this?" Instantly, Yulia respectfully placed the sketchbook on a rock. Then, she knelt down and put her palms together. Then, she took out 2 carrots from her body and placed them on the ground as if they were offerings. Namo namo namo. After the offerings, Yulia carried the hero seed and continued to climb the mountain uneasily. Beside the bus stop, Boss Luo walked slowly among the pedestrians with a shopping bag in his hand. At this moment, he was on the phone with the man who called himself his homeroom teacher. "I'm standing under the pillar of the big bell. You can easily see me, Mr. Luo." "Indeed, it's easy to see you." Boss Luo froze for a second and then said, "I think I see you." Under the pillar of the big bell, Boss Luo saw a guy with a Qingtian doll head, wearing a suit and a tie, and carrying a briefcase. Probably a male? Boss Luo looked around with some doubts and found that the pedestrians were still pedestrians. They looked like normal people. He walked towards the weird-looking guy and took the initiative to greet him. "Hello, are you Luoya's homeroom teacher?" "Yes, I am. I'm Mr. Qingtian." The homeroom teacher nodded. "Luoya's brother, nice to meet you." "Me too." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Qingtian." Boss Luo smiled. "So, shall we talk here?" "Before we talk, I hope you can take a look at this document." Mr. Qingtian took out an envelope from his briefcase. Boss Luo opened it and glanced at it. He was confused. "This is Luoya's withdrawal application?" Mr. Qingtian said. "It seems that Mr. Luo really doesn't know about this." Boss Luo shook his head. Mr. Qingtian said, "These days Luoya didn't come to school. Although Luoya often asked for leave to rest at home because of her health condition, until today I received this letter. I think I need to find Luoya's family. Mr. Luo, I don't know what you think about this matter." Boss Luo thought, "I don't know what the homeroom teacher thinks about the withdrawal. After all, I don't know much about my sister's situation in school. Luoya rarely communicates with others in school. She seems to be very solitary." Mr. Fersky said, "Even though bullying hasn't happened before, it's true that not many students are willing to interact with her. Besides, she doesn't come to school often anyway. This semester, her attendance rate didn't even reach the standard. She may face the punishment of repeating a year." "I see." Boss Luo suddenly nodded and put the withdrawal letter into the shopping bag. "About this matter, I'll go back and find out more about it." This. Mr. Qingtian probably didn't expect the student's guardian to be so straightforward. He seemed a little stunned. "Mr. Luo, I think this matter is very serious. I hope you can take it seriously. If you keep this indifferent attitude, it will be a terrible thing for Luoya." "Mr. Qingtian, right?" Boss Luo looked at him expressionlessly. "You think I won't take my sister's matter seriously?" The homeroom teacher seemed to shudder. No, I didn't mean that." Boss Luo said, "Thank you for telling me this today, Mr. Qingtian. Then goodbye." Okay. Chapter 2154. On the mountain path of the godly mountain there was a big toad. "Are you the traveler who passed the checkpoint of the giant Kaz?" "I'm the guard of the second checkpoint, Master Taramar." Senior sister, Yulia, wasn't surprised at all, even if the one in front of her was just a talking toad. What a joke! What kind of world hadn't she seen before? In some strange subworlds, even Ding Ding was able to walk around freely, okay? So, what's the second checkpoint? Senior sister, Yulia, went straight to the point. Please answer me. Who is the person who likes fairies the most in the world? The buzzing voice echoed in Yulia's ears. She couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then, she quickly took out a crayon and a piece of drawing paper. She finally understood. Not only was the shop owner's magic power boundless, but his drawing also had godly power. It was as if he was using a cheat code. This is the person who likes fairies the most. Senior sister, Yulia, raised the drawing in her hand and answered confidently. Master Taramaru was silent for a while, and then he said, correct. You pass. Then, the big toad that was blocking the way turned into a stone and squatted on the side of the mountain path. The whole process didn't even take more than 10 minutes. Moreover, most of the time was spent on drawing. It was too easy. Senior sister, Yulia, couldn't help but sigh inwardly. However, on the way up the mountain, she saw a lot of corpses of stickmen. In fact, these 2 checkpoints weren't simple at all. After all, each person only had one chance to answer the questions. Who did the fairies on the godly mountain like the most? In senior sister, Yulia's opinion, there was no standard answer to this kind of subjective question. The traveler heading to the godly mountain might not even be able to answer the first question. But on the other hand, if one could answer the first question correctly, they might be able to pass the second question as well. After all, the person they liked the most and the person they liked the most were bound together. I wonder if the third question will be as simple as this. This time, a senior sister Yulia decided not to worship the boss's portrait. Instead, she put it in her pocket. Perhaps she could use it? In short, if he couldn't solve a problem, he would sacrifice the boss. Winter Kingdom, Ice Palace, Palace of Ice. The Empress seemed to be taking a nap on the throne, but the air pressure in the Palace of Ice suddenly dropped, and the Empress slowly opened her eyes. Your Majesty, what has alarmed you? Is it Balaam? The Empress looked below the throne. There was a kneeling figure in the middle of the hall. It's been too long. About half a day. Balaam's president, or rather, the commander of the chilly Winter Kingdom's royal knights, raised his head and replied. The world of one of the pages has begun to be conquered, the Winter Queen suddenly said. Commander Balong was surprised. Oh? There was actually someone who could conquer the page world? Is it one of the holy maiden candidates? Yulia, the Winter Queen said slowly. It's her. Commander Balong thought for a moment and then shook his head. Even if they discovered something, it's useless for them to conquer the page world. After all, the pages are in your Majesty's hands. No. The Winter Queen said coldly, the page world that this holy maiden candidate is in is one that I haven't grasped. Balong was slightly surprised. It's the core page? No. The Winter Queen shook her head. I haven't found a way to open the core page. This time, I've sent many people, but I still can't find the world of the core page. Yulia is in one of the special page worlds that I haven't found a way to open. Then, what kind of world is it? Commander Balong asked solemnly. The Winter Queen said in a low voice, it's a world where I can't find the correct answer. It's a ridiculous world. Perhaps this holy maiden candidate will be able to complete this world's strategy. Isn't that great? Balaam smiled and said, we haven't been able to find the world of the core pages. Perhaps it's because we haven't been able to complete the mission of the few unique pages. The key to opening the core pages is to gather all the pages. That's what I'm thinking, the Winter Queen said slowly. I didn't expect to be able to open the core page this time. As long as I can complete the invasion of the Holy Light Kingdom, I'll have achieved my goal. Perhaps there will be more surprises for me this time. Luck is on your side, Your Majesty. Commander Balong knelt and bowed. The Winter Queen said, Balong, I'm going to project into Yulia's page world. I'll leave the kingdom's affairs to you. I'll leave the princess's affairs to you as well. Remember, you can't kill her or let her go. I need this princess to wait for the birth of this child." The Winter Queen gently stroked her swollen belly. There was a life that was about to be born. At the same time, this page world of the chilly Winter Kingdom was one of the last special page worlds that her main force was attacking. On the stage of the circus, the audience applauded enthusiastically like waves. Huge fire rings were ignited. The beast tamer with the head of Chintiandal was waving a whip. On the stage, a toad the size of a lion was passing through the fire rings one after another. The toad was too big. If there was a slight mistake, it would be ignited by the fire. With each success, the audience became more and more excited. "What are you looking at? Daphne, get ready. It's our turn soon." Okay. Lo. "Yes, Mr. J." The young girl, who was called, responded hurriedly. Behind the young girl was a black-haired young man in a white suit, a pure white cloak, and a top hat. He was Mr. J. Mr. J, the magician in the circus, was also the pillar of the entire circus. Every time the circus performed, most of the audience came for this magical magician. Moreover, a large part of the audience was female. Today, as usual, after the beast tamer Mr. Qingtian's performance, Magician J would continue to perform. Mr. J's performance was not fixed every time. He would always prepare a new magic show for a new batch of audience. Mr. J's fame, in addition to his superb performance, was also due to this. But I still don't know what I should do next." The young girl couldn't help but ask nervously. The young girl had been in this circus for more than half a month. From being unfamiliar and at a loss, she gradually adapted to it. Now it was her first time on the stage. The reason was that the young girl couldn't always be a freeloader in the circus. It just so happened that Mr. J needed a newcomer as his assistant tonight. "Just stand there," Mr. J said with a slight smile. This was a smile that the young girl was familiar with. However, the young girl knew that this Mr. J was probably not the Mr. J she knew. As for why it was like this, the young girl still had no clue. The circus was constantly moving forward. If the young girl wanted to follow the circus, she might be able to find the answer. Soon, the beast tamer left with his big toad. Then, the lights flickered. The magician and his young girl assistant made a grand appearance. The opening was a few common pigeon magic trick. The young girl stood on the stage in a daze. The magician J could always take out the pigeons he needed from the young girl's pocket. The maiden was in a daze the entire time because the maiden had no idea when the pigeons had appeared. Of course, this might not be a novel magic trick. At best, it was just an appetizer. Then, let's begin tonight's official performance. The only performance. On the stage, with this sentence, the magician opened his hands and the pigeons flew from his hands to the audience. Then, the magician opened a black umbrella. At the same time, he asked the audience to open their own umbrellas. The umbrellas were prepared by the audience before the performance. When all the audience had opened their umbrellas, the top curtain of the circus slowly opened, revealing the brilliant starry sky. They subconsciously raised their heads and looked at the brilliant night sky. What is this? But soon, the audience realized that something seemed to have wet their faces. It was water droplets, or rather, rain. The rain started to fall. This should be artificial rain, so the audience had to prepare their own umbrellas. The sound of a finger snapping was heard, and everyone subconsciously turned to look at the magician on the stage. The magician smiled and said, "Have you seen time stopped? This is what it looks like when time stops." Magician J stretched out his hand again and slowly opened his palm. With this scene, the raindrops in the air floated up one by one. Under the illumination of the stage lights, the crystal-clear water droplets floated like gemstones. The sky was the Milky Way, the ground was also the Milky Way. The audience was immersed in this dreamlike world, as though they had forgotten the flow of time. On the stage, the young girl's body slowly floated up at this moment. The young girl was shocked and exclaimed in disbelief. The young girl, Daphne didn't even know how she suddenly flew up. The young girl flew to the audience and wandered in the stagnant rain. In this dreamlike space, the audience really forgot about time. Until the light gradually dissipated and the young girl returned to the stage again. The rain instantly resumed and gradually stopped. The top curtain of the circus also slowly closed. The magician bowed and bowed on the stage, under the fanatical applause. This was obviously another successful performance. The audience began to leave the circus, wondering when they would be able to see such a wonderful performance again. The circus would only play once in a place, and then it would leave. It was its habit. In the middle of the night, the audience had completely left the grassland near the city. The night fog gradually wrapped around the circus. The members of the circus began to pack up. They would always leave at night and appear at night, performing for different people again and again. "What are you thinking about?" Something was thrown to her. The young girl subconsciously caught it and realized it was a can of warm canned coffee. "Thank you," the young girl said softly. "Take it as a return gift for being an assistant tonight." The magician chuckled. "Actually, I didn't do anything, I just stood there." The young girl shook her head. "But, how did you do it? Like magic, it actually stopped the rain?" "Yes, that's magic. This is my biggest secret." The magician blinked and said solemnly, "This secret can't be known to the living." It was the first time the young girl saw such an expression on Mr. Magician's face. She couldn't help feeling nervous, and even swallowed her saliva. "Just kidding." The magician suddenly chuckled. "Just kidding. It's actually light magic." "Light. It's just a technique that uses the flickering of light to deceive people's eyes." The magician shrugged. "Of course, I can't tell you the exact details. Otherwise, I won't be able to do the sponsored partnership." "Ha!" The young girl, stilled and immediately asked, "But why can I fly? Have you forgotten about the pigeons?" The magician smiled. "When I got the pigeons, I secretly put on a special thread. Look, do you see the special buttons on the clothes? After tying the thread, the pigeons will be sent to the stage and someone will carry you. No wonder I had to change into this before going on stage." The young girl was enlightened. "So, it's all a scam," Mr. J said casually. "Magic is a lie that brings happiness and smiles to people. Isn't such a lie good?" "It's quite good." The young girl nodded. "Take a break and get ready to set off." The magician patted the young girl's shoulder lightly. The young girl watched the magician leave completely before retracting her gaze. Daphne couldn't help but laugh at herself. "So it's a trick of light." "That's right. How can there be magic?" Suddenly, there was a slight tremor. The circus tent began to fold, change shape, and then it began to rise and move in the fog. The young girl stared blankly at the four huge legs that appeared out of thin air under the tent. Even though it wasn't the first time she saw it, this was actually a circus that could move by itself. So, is there magic or not? Daphne felt that she still didn't understand the circus and Mr. J. In the corridor leading to the treatment room, Ludic had been observing the driver from behind. He actually wanted to take off the Chintian doll headgear and see what the driver looked like. "We're here, Dr. Ludic." Then, the driver stopped in front of a heavily guarded door. The door slowly opened and a toad wearing a white robe and glasses appeared in front of Ludic. "This is Dr. Taramaru, a professional in charge of Tsang Lei and the driver's adaptation work," the Chintian doll driver introduced. "Hello?" Ludic opened his mouth. Dr. Taramaru looked up and said expressionlessly, "I heard you have a way to cure the driver of Tsang Lei? I can't guarantee, I have to take a look to know." Ludic thought for a while and said. Dr. Taramaru thought for a while and nodded. "Come in, we already have the best medical equipment here." If you need anything else, we'll try our best to find it for you. Seeing Dr. Taramur turn around, and then jump forward, Ludic sighed in his heart, is this really a toad? Until he came to the glass wall of the observation room, Ludic's expression was weird. He finally saw the driver of Tsang Lei, who was seriously injured and on the verge of death. On the bed, there was a girl wrapped in gauze, with 4 infusion tubes in her hands and feet, and wearing a respirator. K'er Lily. But Ludic couldn't help but widen his eyes. Chapter 2155. However, Ludic Headmaster was a person who had seen the world. Even when the Saint of Freedom City held a banquet, he would still be invited to attend. Even when facing the Saint, Principal Headmaster was still able to joke around, let alone when he met Kelly here. Moreover, K'er Lily was the pilot of Tsang Lei. Moreover, there was Dr. Toad Taramaru who could talk. Moreover, before the treatment I want to be quiet. Ludic Headmaster's expression didn't change as he looked at those strange gazes. This is my habit. Only by being quiet can I be more focused. Yes, that's true, but I hope it won't take too long. Dr. Taramaru nodded and then asked someone to arrange a separate room for Dr. Ludic Headmaster to calm down. After a while, Dr. Ludic Headmaster appeared in front of everyone again and directly said, I need a room where I can perform the operation immediately. Also, I don't want any disturbances during the operation, including the surveillance cameras. Hearing this, a group of experts led by Dr. Taramaru immediately objected. Unexpectedly, Dr. Taramaru actually agreed to this request and arranged everything as fast as possible. He even personally turned off the surveillance cameras. In this case, we won't be able to see what he is doing inside. What if this is the person recommended by Headmaster Calvin? Dr. Taramaru said indifferently. He only has one request, which is for us to cooperate unconditionally. Otherwise, Calvin won't hand over the original pilot of Tsang Lei. This time, facing the 98 messengers is an unprecedented danger. How can he be so stubborn? Dr. Taramaru said indifferently, since you don't agree, do you have a way to break into the pilot's academy? Since you don't, then put away your bureaucratic system. Moreover, the patient is also a student of the academy. Do you think that as the headmaster of the academy, he will just watch and do nothing and casually send someone to harm her? Ludic Headmaster didn't know what happened outside the door. After confirming that the surveillance cameras were blocked during the operation, he began to prepare. He came to the girl in front of the operation table and carefully looked at her. It was indeed K'er Lily, at least the face was the same. However, with the example of Huang, Ludic could not judge whether this K'er Lily was the one he knew. After taking a deep breath, Ludic removed the oxygen mask from the girl on the operating table. Then, he quickly used the scalpel to cut his finger, squeezed out some blood, and smeared it on the girl's lip. Not long after, the eyelids of the girl, who was in a deep coma, moved slightly, but it seemed that she couldn't open them. Ludic quickly whispered into the girl's ear, Don't force yourself to speak, I know you can at least hear what I'm saying. Later, I'll give you a hint, remember to bite down. But, don't bite too hard, because I'm really afraid of pain. After saying that, Ludic Headmaster gritted his teeth and resolutely put his finger into the girl's mouth. Come on. I hope the cost and the gain can be proportional. Hey, I told you, don't bite too hard. The headmaster's face became extremely pale, and even his forehead was full of sweat, and he suddenly knelt in front of the operation table. At the same time, the various life signs of the girl were increasing at an incredible speed toward the index of a normal person. Run. In front of the operation table, the girl suddenly sat up, and there was a horrified expression on her face. Run. Here? But the girl quickly realized that this was not the cockpit of Tsang Lei, and there was no terrifying impact of the 98th time in front of her. Moreover, there were not many injuries on her body. Except that she felt a little weak, she didn't feel bad at all. Mr. Headmaster. But after finding a man lying on the ground, the girl was startled at first, and then she revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. It seems, the income this time is better than expected. Headmaster Ludic Headmaster got up weakly at this time. So, you're really Lily, and not someone similar. Sure enough, that old bastard Calvin already knew about you. In the operation room, Ludic Headmaster shook his head. No wonder he asked me to come here to save someone. It turns out that the person he wants to save is you. Lily moved her hands and feet at this time. I should have been seriously injured, but how come all of a sudden? I remember that Headmaster seemed to have told me before. It's a secret. Ludic Headmaster blinked. It's a secret. Lily nodded thoughtfully, and then said, But what if the people outside ask about it? It's good that you don't know. Ludic Headmaster smiled. Just think of it as giving me something to negotiate or to scare people. The little maid in the mansion nodded again, not fully understanding. Then let's talk about you. How did you come to this world, and how did you become the pilot of Tsang Lei? This matter had to be explained before the Holy Maiden ceremony. That afternoon, a maid in the mansion picked up a ball of paper that had been thrown in through the window. It said that if Mr. Arthaces wanted to be safe, he had to go to the Holy Maiden event venue alone. But not long after he arrived at the ceremony, he encountered a murder case on the stage, and then not long after, the venue was swallowed by black mud. When I woke up, I was already here, and my identity was changed to that of a pilot. Lily looked terrified. This was the 97th emissary, and it was my first battle. I didn't expect to be able to destroy it. What I didn't expect was that the 98th emissary appeared one after another. Maybe I'm just too unlucky. No follow-up? Ludic Headmaster suddenly frowned. What follow-up? Lily was surprised. Ludic Headmaster said directly, The guy who told you to go to the Holy Maiden ceremony, didn't he tell you anything after you entered the venue? What did he tell you to do? Lily shook her head. After entering the venue, I started to look around. I didn't know what to find, so I just walked around until I saw the black mud. So, the mysterious guy who told you to come here didn't expect the black mud to appear? Ludic Headmaster said, or this person's original plan was interrupted, or maybe he told you to come here because of the black mud. By the way, when did you and old man Calvin meet? Lily said, I saw Scholar Calvin on the school's broadcast, so I tried to find him. In the end, I really found him. Scholar Calvin told me to get used to my current identity first, and he was also looking for a way to leave. That old man told me the same thing. Ludic Headmaster thought for a while. Then, we are now strangers in the same situation. By the way, Lily, can you still pray? I can't open the destiny system. Lily shook her head. And I don't know why, but ordinary prayers are accompanied by a strong headache. Principal, can you? I haven't tried yet, I'll try later. Ludic Headmaster shook his head, and immediately said, Lily, let me ask you something. When you were in Tsang Lei, did you see the appearance of the messenger that appeared after the 98th impact? Yes, I saw it. Lily's expression couldn't help but freeze. Is it that person? Ludic Headmaster stared into Lily's eyes and asked, You should know better than me after all, he is a resident of your residence. I don't know. Lily said hesitantly, It really looks like Mr. Luo, but it doesn't feel like it. Mr. Luo gives people a different feeling. You can't be sure. Ludic Headmaster nodded. Sure enough, the information I can grasp now is still too little. But I just came here, and these things don't seem to be rushed. Well, don't be so energetic, try to make yourself look weaker, it's good for you. Lily nodded obediently. Because the principal was actually a trustworthy person. Not only because it was Mr. Asakes, Principal Ludic Headmaster, and Scholar Calvin, who found her dying in the snow, but also because Mr. Asakes once said that Ludic headmaster was the most trustworthy person in a desperate situation. Principal, are you leaving? Lily felt Ludic headmaster's plan. I can't stay here forever. Ludic headmaster shrugged and said, besides, my mission to save you has been completed. Now it's time to let Calvin fulfill his promise. I'll come to you again. Be careful. In the quiet town, after the sunset, the street lights were lit up. In a small room that was enough for 2 people to live in, Boss Luo was busy in the kitchen. Although his skills were not as good as Miss Maid's, he had been trained since he was young. Occasionally, he would even make unique dishes that Miss Maid could not make. It was like adding magic to the dishes. It's like adding magic. At this time, the girl was quietly opening the door of the room. She looked at the back of the half-open kitchen at home in disbelief, and unconsciously swallowed her saliva. Dinner will be ready soon, Boss Luo suddenly said. Luoya, can you help to clean the table? She never went out of the room to eat breakfast. It was not like he did not know. Why did he ask her to clean the table? She did not want to walk out of the room so easily. We are going to eat hot pot tonight. It may not be so convenient in the room. Boss Luo suddenly said, if you care, I can go for a walk and come back later. Damn it, he actually used this trick. But if it was hot pot, it was still, no need. The girl pushed open the door and walked out shyly. Boss Luo looked at her with interest but found that the girl was wearing a half-fox mask. Only her mouth was exposed. Boss Luo did not care. He smiled and said, wipe the table first, it will be ready soon. Okay, it was a very soft sound of response. The girl had already started to take a rag and walked around the table. Boss Luo said again, today your head teacher came to find me. He told me that you want to withdraw from school. Hearing this, the girl froze, then threw the rag on the table, and was about to run into the room. But Boss Luo said, have you thought about what you want to do after you withdraw from school? The girl who was rushing forward couldn't help but stop in her tracks. She turned around in surprise. He didn't seem to be angry? No, this was just the calm before the storm. In any case, no matter what I want to do, you won't agree to it, right? The girl averted her gaze. There's no point in asking this, right? If I were your brother, Luo Qiu said softly, no matter what you want, I think I will agree. What did you say? The girl was in disbelief. At this time, Boss Luo came out with the hot pot and smiled. It's time to eat. Crayon Kingdom, Godly Mountain, Lake. After the giant and the toad, Senior Yulia saw a guy wearing a white robe with the head of a Teru Bozu on his head. She had completely adapted to it. I'm the guardian of the 3rd level, the spirit of the lake, Qingtian elf. I didn't expect someone to reach the 3rd level. Brave traveler, are you ready to accept the 3rd level? Ask away. Yulia nodded and was ready to take out the boss's hand-drawn portrait again. The Qingtian elf said with a serious expression, please tell me the 10 advantages of the Godly Mountain Fairy. Yulia blinked and withdrew the boss's portrait that she was about to take out. It seemed useless even if she took out the boss's portrait. Smart? Yulia thought for a while and said one tentatively. Correct. The Qingtian elf still looked serious. 9 more. Continue. Obedient? Cute. Kind. Cheerful. Correct. Yulia suddenly stopped. After blinking, she continued. Sexy? Correct. The big eyes? Correct. Hard-working and thrifty? Correct. Light body and soft body. What are these advantages? In the end, the Qingtian elf froze and said in confusion, however, they seem correct. Pass. F***CK. Is the 3rd level so easy? However, looking at the passage that led to the higher part of the Godly Mountain, Yulia calmed down and walked up. At the foot of the sacred mountain, a figure slowly walked out. It did not look like a matchstick figure, but at least it was a colorful crayon drawing. The person looked up at the sacred mountain where the clouds were gradually dispersing, and seemed to be hesitant as he muttered to himself. Passed the third test? So fast. What's going on? Suddenly, the figure chuckled. It seems that this special page might appear this time. At this moment, the earth began to shake, and a towering giant appeared instantly. But before she could finish, the figure said, I'm not going up the mountain. What a joke! In this special page, even though she had mastered most of the pages of the Book of Gaia, she still couldn't defeat the giant guarding the level. She couldn't even block a single attack. The giant was silent. The giant disappeared. The person who came slowly let out a sigh of relief. She knew the dangers of this page. ########## PS. Happy New Year's Day. Chapter 2156. At dawn, Daphne woke up due to a rapid vibration. Even though it had been more than half a month, Daphne still couldn't get used to Mr. J.'s moving circus. The circus stopped moving, which meant that they had arrived at a brand new place. There would be 2 days before the performance began. One part was for the members to prepare for the performance, and the other part was for the members to rest and relax. They could go out. Haha, I'm going to have a good time this time. I like this seaside town. The girls must be very enthusiastic. When Daphne, who was neatly dressed, walked out of the room, she could already see the circus members discussing going out. Daphne didn't intend to join in the fun, even though the circus members had begun to accept this shy little girl, and extended an invitation. Why, it's rare for you to come to the seaside. Don't you plan to play? The next time you have to be close to the seaside may be a long time later. Mr. J. Daphne called out politely and asked curiously, why does the circus always go to other places? Perhaps the frequency doesn't need to be so high? The novelty of people will soon pass. Jay said casually, magic has been deciphered ever since it was developed. From the beginning, it was a mysterious performance method, but later, once the principle is understood, people will quickly lose interest. In fact, it's not just magic. It's the same for other types of performances. Perhaps only children would never get tired of it. Daphne opened her mouth. After a while, she said coldly, Mr. J, magic, will it be difficult to learn? You want to learn? Daphne nodded. I always feel that I can't stay in the circus doing nothing. Everyone has something they are good at. Jay thought for a while and said, if you really want to learn, I can teach you. Really? Daphne was quite happy, but she soon hesitated. Then, what do I need to do? What do you want to do? Jay smiled and said, I will teach you, you learn. Learning is probably the only thing you have to do. Daphne said, but generally speaking, you won't agree so quickly, right? If imparting knowledge required setting up many conditions, I think human civilization would have probably been at a standstill. That makes sense, Daphne said subconsciously. This is what my teacher said. Jay smiled and said, I'm just using it. Of course, if he's a bad guy, I won't consider teaching him. Mr. Jay's teacher is... She died in an accident during a magic show, Jay said calmly. She died on her favorite stage. So sorry. Mr. J was looking at the seaside in the distance. Under the rising sun, there was a golden flash. He stared blankly and murmured, Say, in this world, is there a kind of magic that can resurrect the dead? That's probably at the level of magic, right? Daphne subconsciously said. That's right. It's already at the level of magic. Mr. J nodded and immediately sighed. It's a pity that there is no magic in this world, only magic. Daphne opened her mouth and instinctively glanced at the circus tent behind her. Without magic, how do you move this circus? But Mr. J obviously didn't want to continue this topic. He looked at Daphne and said, If you want to learn magic, hand speed is very important. You must make the speed of your hands faster than the speed of the human eye. Mr. J said seriously, you should train your hand speed, no matter what method you use. Train hand speed? After nightfall, God-blessed city was abnormally quiet, so quiet that Mr. Asakes felt that it was abnormally ear-piercing even when he casually knocked on the iron bars in the detention room. But even so, the guards didn't respond. Is there anyone? If there's no one, I'm going to break out. I'm really going to break out. I'm going overboard. Still, there was no response. Arthashis took a deep breath and grabbed onto a railing with both hands. The muscles on his arms bulged and the iron railing gradually bent. The corridor outside the detention room was empty. Mr. Asakes even easily destroyed a few doors and escaped from this facility. The entire God-blessed city was built on a mountain. The headquarters of the Holy See was on the top of the mountain. God-blessed city was not only abnormally quiet but also extremely dark. There were only a few places in the city below the mountain that were lit. According to Isabel's information, God-blessed city would welcome a terrifying enemy. They had already evacuated the people since yesterday. At this moment, a figure was rapidly approaching Mr. Arthashis. Asakes, you really succeeded in escaping. Isabel, what's the situation here? Mr. Asakes quickly asked. Not very good. Isabel shook her head. In the evening, Odi personally sent me to the airship to wait for the ship. The airship was full of people. Then, when they weren't paying attention, I sneaked down quietly. When I came back, I saw that the people of the Holy See seemed to have gathered at the square. They should be preparing to mobilize and fight. In other words, there aren't many people in the Holy See now? Mr. Asakes was deep in thought. Why are you asking this? Isabel couldn't help but frown as if she had noticed something. Do you have something to do? There's something that has been bothering me. What is it? Do you remember that I said that I came to this world before you, more than half a year ago? Mr. Asakes quickly said. Isabel nodded. After you were infected, you were trapped in the vampire's castle. Mr. Asakes said, That's right. Although I was trapped for half a year, I still had some space to move around in the castle. Because I was too bored, I basically searched all the places in the vampire's castle that I could enter. Among them, I found quite a number of books. Books? There's not much time left. Mr. Asakes suddenly looked at the night sky and saw the dark clouds pressing down. It seems like something is approaching. Come, let's go inside the Holy See first. We'll talk as we walk. Okay. After hesitating for a moment, Isabel seemed to have no choice but to agree. Follow the spirits. Follow the spirit. Follow, the nightmarish voice kept whispering in her ears. Sister Celine woke up with a start once again. She was currently working in an orphanage, and her identity was a new employee who had just moved in for less than 2 weeks. Orphanage. Welfare Institute. In Sister Celine's opinion, this didn't seem to be much different from her previous life. She didn't even take long to adapt to it. She was even praised by the orphanage's director, who said that she was very talented in this area. She couldn't differentiate between the orphanage and the Welfare Institute. This felt like a dream. In the dream, she was in a place called Freedom City, taking care of a group of children who couldn't gather their faith and hid in the corners of the city. However, this place also had her complete life. She could even clearly recall her memories of her parents, friends, childhood, learning, and so on. However, the Freedom City in the dream was getting more and more blurry. She couldn't even remember the faces of those children. She couldn't remember the name of the child who always wore red clothes and a big hat and liked to jump around. Kelly? Ms. Celine. I'm here. A slightly low female voice suddenly sounded in Celine's ears. It was the head caretaker of the orphanage. She had been serving the orphanage for 15 years. She heard that she was an orphan who grew up in the orphanage. Because she couldn't find a suitable adoptive family, she joined the orphanage and became an employee. Hello, Ms. Shala. How can I help you? Celine asked with slight respect. The head caretaker named Shala said, Ms. Celine, have you seen Littleya? Littleya? Celine was stunned and quickly searched her memory. Is it the child who always likes to hold an orange-toed doll? That's her. Ms. Shawla nodded. After lunch, I don't know where she went. I've been looking for her for a long time. Hearing this, Celia hurriedly put down the work at hand and wiped her hands on her apron. She said anxiously, "That's not good. That child is still so young. If we can't find him, we don't know what will happen to him. Miss Shawla, let me go with you to find her." "That's the only way." Miss Shawla shook her head and said, "This child is probably just throwing a tantrum and hiding." "Throwing a tantrum?" Selin was stunned. Miss Shawla smiled and said, "Oh, you don't know yet. Little Ye has found a suitable adoptive family, and that family has agreed. They will come in 2 days. Is this a good thing? She probably can't bear to part with her brother." Miss Shawla sighed and said, "They grew up together. I'm afraid the little girl won't be able to accept it if they suddenly separate. However, this opportunity is too rare." "Let's find little Ye first," Selin said after thinking for a while. They decided to search separately. Miss Shawla continued to search in the orphanage's mansion, while Selin went to look in the field outside the orphanage. This was a large-scale orphanage that housed hundreds of children. A large area of land was enclosed, creating a paradise-like environment for the children. It was said that a world-class rich man funded the construction. In fact, Selin even felt that these children who had lost their families might be better off growing up here. Unknowingly, Selin had found the edge of the orphanage. She was blocked in front of a white wall that was nearly 4 meters high. There was even an electric fence on the top of the wall, and there were many surveillance cameras around. Selin was a little scared and stepped back. Although she knew that there was an electric fence on the wall, as well as the existence of the surveillance cameras, it was still a little unsettling. It seems that she didn't come here. Otherwise, the surveillance cameras would have discovered her long ago. Selin shook her head and stepped back a few more steps. Then, she turned and left. It was almost dark, and there was still no news from Miss Shawla. At night, a child staying in the wild would be in danger. Selin's face was full of worry, and she couldn't help but become more serious. Maybe I should ask Little Ye's brother. Selin had an idea. Maybe I can find out where Little Ye usually hides if she hides. Selin immediately contacted Miss Shawla, but she was told that Little Ye's brother couldn't be found now. The 2 children might have hidden themselves. Now, the caretakers of the orphanage had started to search under the instructions of the director. Little Ye, can you hear my voice? Little Ye. Selin chose another path to return to the dormitory in the park, hoping to get some luck. She hadn't been working for long, and the park was too big. She didn't even go deep into some places, and she felt unfamiliar. In the forest, there was a building with lights shining out. Selin subconsciously walked closer to take a look. It turns out that there's a church here. Selin looked at the small church in surprise, but it seemed that no one had walked around for some time. The lights in front of the church flickered occasionally, and the surroundings seemed unusually lonely. Selin had a strong sense of familiarity with the church. In that dream, she would often be in the church and pray devoutly. Little Ye, are you inside? Selin slowly opened the door of the church. It was brighter inside. Selin subconsciously walked in and soon arrived in front of the podium. There was no statue of anyone here. Selin was a little surprised, but she quickly knelt down in front of the platform skillfully. How was prayer done? She found that this kind of thing seemed to be innate. It was so familiar and so natural. She slowly closed her eyes and subconsciously said, "Saint, please protect those 2 children. Right now they must be suffering from the torment of hesitation." A ray of light suddenly appeared in front of Selin, and it was so dazzling that she couldn't open her eyes. She saw that something seemed to be condensing on the platform. It condensed into a figure. At the same time, a slightly childish voice sounded in Selin's ears. "In this kind of place, praying to the saint is probably useless, but it's a good thing to have faith." The light figure gradually became clear. A boy in a loose white robe was sitting casually on the platform, looking at her with a faint smile. Celine subconsciously blurted out, "Emetatro?" The boy on the platform chuckled. "Not bad, you can still remember my name." Celine subconsciously covered her mouth and said in disbelief, How do I know your name? No, isn't that a dream? But who am I? Where is this place?" The boy on the platform jumped down and said calmly, "It's okay if you can't remember, I'll help you remember. After all, I borrowed your eyes to come here. I should at least give you something in return." As he said that, Celine's gaze suddenly froze because she saw the illusion of a 36-winged angel behind the boy. Chapter 2157. Just like a hug, the 36-winged angel slowly flew toward Celine and passed through her body. A white feather fluttered in the church, and then gradually disappeared. Finally, only one feather was left and it slowly fell. A small hand grabbed the feather. It was the little boy in front of her, Madanzo. "Do you remember now?" Celine was stunned at first and then fell silent for a moment. She nodded in fear. "How did you? I told you before, it's because I borrowed your eyes." Madanzo played with the feather in his hand. "Basically, I won't appear. However, this place is a little special. Even if there are only thoughts left, different thoughts will be treated as independent individuals." "You borrowed my eyes?" Celine subconsciously touched her eyes. Madanzo shook his head and said, "It's just a metaphor. I didn't really do anything to your eyes." Celine nodded as if she understood. Then, she seemed to have recalled something. Is it when we were in that place in the interlayer of consciousness? Indeed, it was at that time. Madanzo nodded. "However, it's not enough to just do it through you. I need another medium to do it." Of course, the situation at that time was that both conditions were fulfilled. Celine thought for a moment and said, "I just remember that at that time, Grand Scholar Calvin seemed to have something that stabbed me in the back. Oh right, before he left, he gave me something. Could it be? Didn't you open it to see what it was?" Madanzo asked curiously. Sister Celine shook her head. I don't want to be troublesome. It's best not to know. Besides, Grand Scholar Calvin also said that I shouldn't open it unless I have no other choice." "You're very obedient." Madanzo chuckled. "You were also like that at that time. I told you not to look at those eyes, but you really resisted." Sister Celine said self-deprecatingly, "I'm probably only left with this bit of stupidity." "Stupidity? No, in my opinion." Madanzo suddenly jumped in front of Celine. "Perhaps you are the most suitable one." "What?" Madanzo shook her head. "Nothing. Besides, it's not something we should be thinking about right now. For the current you, the most important thing is to figure out how to get out of here." "You mean, to leave the orphanage?" Sister Celine asked subconsciously. "If I can't leave this world, it's useless even if I leave this orphanage." Madanzo shook her head. "On the contrary, only by staying here will you be able to find the key to leaving this place. After all, this is the center of the world." What does this mean? Have you ever played with building blocks?" Sister Celine nodded. Madanzo said, "No matter what you build with blocks, it will always expand outwards from the first block. It was the same in this world. The orphanage was expanding outwards. Moreover, this is the effect of a very advanced power. You should feel lucky to be able to experience this power that even the gods would be amazed by." Sister Celine shook her head, indicating that she did not understand. Madanzo did not mind. "It's okay if you don't understand. You just need to know that the center of the world is here. This is a starting point and also a breakthrough point. How are we going to find this breakthrough point?" Sister Celine still understood what he was trying to say. "First, we need to find out the truth of this orphanage." Madanzo smiled and said, "Come on. This should be a rare adventure for me. After all, I don't have many opportunities like this." As she said, Madanzo, who was wearing a white robe, changed into a checkered windbreaker. The feather in his hand turned into a pipe? She felt that it was not a good thing for a child to smoke a pipe, although Sister Celine knew that the pipe was probably just an ornament. Where are we going now? To investigate. Investigate what? Of course, it's about the missing siblings. Madanzo said matter-of-factly, since the center of the world is in this orphanage, anything unusual that happens here may cause the entire world to change. Sister Celine shook her head. She still found it hard to understand. However, the two missing children had to be found. It had nothing to do with whether she was really a caretaker of this orphanage or not. What mattered was that she had lived in this place with these children for a period of time. She had really considered herself a part of this place. All the caretakers in the park have been dispatched. However, they have not found them yet. Sister Celine sighed. This means that you're looking in the wrong direction. What do you mean? Madanzo said with the pipe in his mouth. As you can see, there are surveillance cameras everywhere in this park. With so many surveillance devices, not to mention two children, even adults will be exposed if they deliberately hide for a long time. You mean, little Ye and the others are in a place that cannot be monitored by surveillance cameras? This is a direction worth trying. Madanzo said, think about it. Which place in the park does not have such surveillance devices? Sister Celine thought for a while and said, I haven't been here for long. There are some places that I haven't been to. For example, the church just now was my first time there. However, logically speaking, the places outside the dormitory area should be filled with surveillance cameras. As far as I know, the places without surveillance cameras are usually the staff dormitory rooms, offices and the like. There are also the children's rooms and bathhouses. This discovery is not bad. I'll immediately inform head nurse Sarah and ask everyone to focus on these places. However, Madanzo stopped Sister Celine and said, don't be in a hurry to inform them. Sister Celine was puzzled. Why? Madanzo narrowed her eyes and said, don't you think that as an orphanage, the management of this place is too strict? That's just too harsh. As she said that, Madanzo pointed ahead with the smoking pipe in her hand. Sister Celine was startled. She subconsciously looked ahead. In front of her, there was a surveillance camera hidden in the crown of a big tree. If not for Madanzo's guidance, it would have been very difficult for her to discover the existence of the surveillance camera. Looking at the slowly moving camera, Sister Celine subconsciously hid behind a nearby tree trunk. She was so frightened that she broke out in cold sweat. Why did you hide? Madanzo asked indifferently. As a caregiver of the park, you have not done anything wrong. Why did you hide? Because. Sister Celine instinctively wanted to say something. However, she soon realized that Madanzo was right. Because she had not done anything wrong and was an official caregiver of the park. She should have nothing to be afraid of. But why did she subconsciously hide? Because you are instinctively afraid. Madanzo looked into Sister Celine's eyes and said, you are afraid because you are subconsciously resisting this kind of spying. Your body and your instincts are telling you that you hate being monitored like this. Since even an adult would feel uncomfortable, what more a child who is more sensitive? Sister Celine was silent. She had already realized this problem. As an orphanage, a place where children could grow up peacefully. For example, the orphanage that she helped Mr. Arthashes take care of, she would think of ways to make the orphanage appear more warm and cozy, like a big family. She would never make it appear so high-pressured. What should we do? Sister Celine asked with a trace of unease. Madanzo thought for a moment and said, it is very easy for us to cover up for another person when we are still children. You mean? Sister Celine sensed something. Driver Academy. Mr. Ludick, without permission, you are temporarily not allowed to enter. Mr. Ludick. Hey! The secretary hurriedly tried to stop him, but the door to Principal Calvin's office was still pushed open. In the office, Principal Calvin was immersed in his work. When he heard the noise, he did not raise his head and said, "It's all right. You can go out first and let him in." The secretary had no choice but to nod and close the office door again. Ludic tidied up his wrinkled clothes and said with interest, "In the past, it was always others who wanted to see me and were stopped by Laval. But I did not expect that there would be a day when I was stopped, and it was in the school. What an unforgettable day. Are you going to tell me, Teacher Calvin?" "The treatment center left a message for me." Scholar Calvin stopped his work and said, "They said that the treatment effect is very good, very successful, and very incredible." Ludic shrugged and directly pulled out a chair in front of the office desk and sat down. "Since you chose me to save people, you should have thought of the consequences. So, why didn't you tell me in advance that the driver of Song Thunder is that child?" "If I had told you, would you not have gone?" Scholar Calvin asked back. Ludic sneered and said, "Well, no matter if you had told me or not, based on my relationship with that child, I would have gone in the end. However, what I didn't expect was that we were the ones who found Lily together and saved her from the snow. Among the three of us, Asakes had been taking care of her, and I would go to see her from time to time. But only you would think of using such a child. Lily's identity as the driver was not given by me. When she came here, she was already the driver," Scholar Calvin said calmly. "But you clearly knew that it was an extremely dangerous thing to let her drive Song Thunder to fight against the emissary." Ludic's voice gradually deepened. "If I did not come here, if I did not have that kind of ability, if I could not save Lily, do you know what the result would be? Teacher, are you really going to leave it like this? If you don't film it, will Arthas hate you? That guy, if he really hates someone, he will hate you for the rest of his life." Before this, there were no signs. Scholar Calvin was silent for a while, then he sighed and said, "I did not think that there would be 2 attacks in a row. Before the battle, the defense force had already done battle simulation, and the winning rate was basically maintained above 90%. Ludic said calmly, "I thought that the Teacher Calvin I knew was the kind of person who would not say such irresponsible words." Scholar Calvin was still calm, and he did not say a word to Ludic. After looking at each other for a while, he slowly said, "Are you done venting your emotions? If you are done venting, let's talk about business." Ludic shrugged and smiled slightly. "I like to talk about cooperation with the old fox the most. But, before we start, teacher, shouldn't you fulfill your promise and tell me everything about the protagonist?" Calvin thought for a moment and said, "The Book of Gaia is a huge, independent, and complicated world group made up of many pages of stories. It is a book that is composed of many pages of stories. Although the story world of each page is different, there are similarities." "Protagonist?" Ludic asked subconsciously. Scholar Calvin nodded and said, "Yes, the story world is different, but the protagonist of the story is the same." Ludic thought for a while and said, "But how do we leave through this protagonist?" Scholar Calvin said, "Not through the protagonist, but through the protagonist to get the page. The page is equivalent to the base of the whole world. Mastering the page is equivalent to mastering all the changes in the world. It is equivalent to being the supreme god of the corresponding page world. Control the whole world." Ludic frowned. "It sounds good, but the point is, since you said that the Book of Gaia is a world group composed of a large number of pages, what's the use of mastering just one page? I remember you said that Kerrigan has mastered most of the pages. As long as Kerrigan has not found the core page and completely controlled the Book of Gaia, no matter how many pages we have, it will only increase the number of pages." Scholar Calvin said slowly, "In this case, if we only have one page in our hands, we are essentially in the same position. Not only can we keep Kerrigan out, but we also have the qualifications to find the core page." Ludic thought for a while. "So, Kerrigan will also come here?" "She may not be here now," Scholar Calvin said, "but as far as I know, Kerrigan opened the Book of Gaia. this time and sent the people in the venue into the page worlds. They are probably the worlds where the pages have not been found. Perhaps, the moment we find the pages of this world, she will appear as the Reaper. But even so, we have to continue. Ludic suddenly narrowed his eyes. Teacher, you plan to use the power of this world, to use those huge fighting machines to fight against the outer gods? Chapter 21:58. That's why your attitude is so tough. You let Kay or Lily sit in the driver's seat of the Blue Thunder. Your purpose is to make the Blue Thunder into a power that you can control. You are really ruthless, Mr. Calvin. Will you be like this too? After a moment of silence, Ludic said with an expressionless face, but looking at the situation now, even if you can achieve your purpose, I'm afraid that the 98th impact will not be easy to overcome. Although I have cured Kay or Lily, it will take more than a day or two to repair such a huge machine, right? Currently, there are already 2 God Eater on the way. Their pilots will arrive before midnight. Scholar Calvin said seriously, as for the Academy, there is actually a backup model. After it is adjusted, it can also be deployed. The God Eater was the general name of a battle machine like the Blue Thunder. The God Eater was a huge monster called the Messengers. However, they were called the gods and hunted. Ludic felt that this was a kind of defilement of the gods. From this point, he could roughly see the main idea of this world. He did not find the existence of faith in this pilot school. After a moment of silence, Ludic asked again, then, how should we find the protagonist of this page world? Any event that can cause unusual changes in the page world must have a protagonist at the center of the event, or a clue that is closely related to the protagonist, Calvin said quickly. Ludic said, in that case, the consecutive shocks this time are abnormal events. The guy who descended after the 98th shock, Zero? Calvin said solemnly, in fact, regarding Zero, I once saw an identical one in another page world. Ludic instantly narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Teacher, you didn't just see the same thing in the page world. You should have seen it in other places, right? In the venue of the Holy Maiden ceremony, as a judge, Scholar Calvin must have seen the young judge sitting next to Isabel. However, Scholar Calvin frowned at this time. Elsewhere? Where? I don't understand. There was no need for him to lie about such matters. In fact, as far as Ludic knew, Calvin was the type of person who would never lie because of the nature of his belief. At most, he would choose not to say certain things to create a misleading illusion. However, it was impossible that he did not notice it. After all, there were only 10 judges. In other words, even among the 10 judges, Mr. Calvin did not see it? This was not normal. It was not a chat group on the internet where people could block each other. However, the guest with the surname Luo was clearly next to Isabel at that time. Although their interaction was not loud, Isabel herself was a conspicuous person. Ludic was also sitting next to Scholar Calvin at that time and had been paying attention to his actions. He remembered that his teacher had looked in Isabel's direction twice, because of some of Isabel's outrageous remarks. Although Ludic's thoughts were intense, he casually shrugged at this time. For a guy like him who could multitask, it was difficult for others to see through his thoughts. It seems that teacher did not hide it this time. He said so. Scholar Calvin shook his head and sighed. It seems that my trustworthiness in your heart has dropped to a dangerous level. Still the same question. Ludic said indifferently. As a great scholar in the Free City. Why do you know this? I'm afraid that this is not the first time you have entered the Book of Gaia, right? At this time, Scholar Calvin took out a document from the drawer. I want you to go and meet this child. He knew that he would not answer this question so easily, so he picked up the document and flipped through it. This child is? One of the reserve pilots of Songlei. Scholar Calvin said. The previous pilot was seriously injured after the 96th impact. According to the sequence, this child should be the one to fight the 97th impact. But you replaced her as K. Air Lily. Ludic frowned. Soon after, he thought of something and said, in other words, the one who should have faced 2 consecutive attacks should have been this child? The center of any unusual event may be related to the protagonist of the world. So, it should be this child. In fact, this child happens to be a student in the class you are in charge of. Scholar Kelvin said. You are very suitable. Ludic did not say anything but carefully looked at the document in his hand. Song Lei Reserve Pilot. 14 years old. No family. Crayon Kingdom. Sacred Mountain. Yulia was still climbing the mountain with difficulty. There was a long way to go before the 3rd level, but so far, the guards of the 4th level had not shown any signs of appearing. What was interesting or strange was that even after climbing the mountain for such a long time, Yulia felt that the distance between her and the top of the mountain had not changed. When she left the 3rd level, she looked at the top of the sacred mountain, and now it was the same. The first 3 levels were not difficult, but they were easy. Well, I guess I snuck in. Yulia could not help but fall into contemplation. If it was because she sacrificed the boss's portrait and used the boss's indescribable power to sneak in, then it was also possible that because she did not follow the correct answer, it led to a situation that would not appear in the final test. It was not that there was no way to solve this situation, and it was quite simple and violent. If Yu Yi-san finds out, I will say that I have been secretly in love with the boss all this time. But will I be beaten to death? Yulia began to paint. On the stones on the road, on the tree trunks, and even on the ground, she began to paint Boss Luo's portrait on all the flat places that she could see. She firmly believed that the boss's portrait had godly power. As long as she said a few words while she was painting, she should be able to trigger the 4th level of the sacred mountain through the boss's indescribable power. She decided to give it a try. In any case, she could not turn back now. After a series of fierce strokes, Yulia wiped the sweat from her forehead. She had painted at least 100 portraits in one go, right? She turned around to look at her masterpiece, and was shocked to the point where she broke out in a cold sweat, because at this moment, more than half of her paintings were gone. Did someone secretly erase these paintings? Yulia froze for a moment and quickly counted the remaining paintings. Then, she turned around and pretended to paint again. Soon, she quietly turned her head again and saw that the painting on a rock not too far away had disappeared as expected. What happened? Yulia remained silent for a while. This time, she didn't move. Instead, she found a tree and leaned against it. Then, she closed her eyes as if she was tired and wanted to rest. After a while, Yulia yawned, stood up, and stretched her body. Then, she looked around with an alarmed expression. Then, she became even more alarmed and looked as if she was about to cry. Oh no, oh no! What happened? Why did the paintings disappear? What should I do? Could it be that a ghost will appear? I'm afraid of ghosts the most. Whenever I see a ghost, I feel dizzy and vomit white foam. I also feel itchy all over and want to come out of the water. Please don't let the ghost come out. I'm very scared. I beg you. Yulia earnestly bowed in all directions. Then, she picked up the crayon again and lay on the ground to continue painting. Just as she was about to finish painting, something gently patted her shoulder. Yulia's body suddenly trembled. Then, she stiffly twisted her neck and looked at the place where her shoulder had been patted. However, she didn't see anything. Yulia became even more scared and even swallowed a mouthful of saliva. I beg you, I'm very timid. Don't scare me. I beg you. At this time, her other shoulder was patted by something again. This time, Yulia's body stiffened even more. Slowly, she moved her gaze to the other side. In an instant, a pale face, with 2 eye sockets and a mouth appeared in front of senior sister Yulia at such a close distance. Ah! Yulia suddenly screamed. Yulia immediately rushed forward. Yulia directly pushed them ghost to the ground. I can't catch you. Yulia sneered and directly knelt on top of the ghost. What is this, bedsheet? However, what was sitting on top of her wasn't a ghost at all. It was just a guy with a white bedsheet with a few holes poked into it to act as its eyes and mouth. Moreover, it was the kind that was relatively petite. She instantly tore the bedsheet apart and saw that the person lying on top of her was actually a girl with a soft body, a young girl. At this time, the young girl's face was slightly red due to fear. Tears seemed to be welling up in her eyes, and she lightly bit her lips as if she was going to cry at any time. This wasn't important. The important thing was, the style isn't right. Yulia instantly shuddered. In this crayon kingdom, the villagers had the style of matchstick figures. Duo heir and Shah man, who didn't survive, also had the style of matchstick figures. She, on the other hand, had a slightly better style. Her style was more like a full crayon drawing style. The guards of the 3 checkpoints on the road also had the same style. However, this young girl's style was very realistic. Yulia exclaimed in a low voice, "You're the fairy from the godly mountain?" At this time, she saw something rushing toward her. It was a little blue bird. The little blue bird rushed to Yulia's head and crazily pecked at it, causing Yulia to feel as if her head was being pricked by needles, and she couldn't stop crying. What happened to the promised immunity to physical attacks? Senior sister Yulia had already fallen to the ground. Although it wasn't to the extent that her head was bleeding, there were many bumps on her head. She even almost bit her own tongue. At this time, the young girl had already put on the bedsheet and was about to slip away. At this time, Yulia hurriedly said, "Wait, don't go. Otherwise, I'll use the person you like the most to draw R18. Hearing this, the young girl who was running away suddenly stopped. At this time, the young girl slowly turned around and said, "Little Blue, peck this bad guy to death." Damn, is she that hateful? Instantly, Yulia screamed again, the female lead is you. Little Blue. Little Blue directly hit Yulia's forehead. Its sharp beak even nailed Yulia between her eyebrows. On the godly mountain, inside the palace of the small wooden hut, Senior Yulia was sitting upright. At this time, the female immortal of the godly mountain was also sitting upright. At this time, the female immortal of the godly mountain was solemnly pushing an exquisite picture book in front of Yulia. The female immortal even thoughtfully included a full set of colorful crayons. Yulia subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. After thinking for a while, she pointed at her head and said seriously, "Drawing is not a problem. But before that, can you help me pluck this bird out of my head?" At this time, the sharp beak of the little blue bird was still nailed between Yulia's eyebrows. Hearing this, the female immortal of the godly mountain nodded. Then, she stood up and held the little bird's body with both hands. "Pull it out." "Much better." Yulia rubbed her wound and then said, "Female immortal, this time I came to look for orange juice. Can you give me some?" At this time, the female immortal of the godly mountain directly stretched out her hand and patted the picture book twice. Then, she only spat out one word, "Drawl." Yulia's eyebrows twitched. At this time, the little blue bird was already spinning in the air. It looked like it would shoot out again at any time. She could only brace herself and pick up the crayons. "Nan Xiaonan, ah, Nan Xiaonan, you have fallen. Have you fallen to the point where you need to draw manga for a little girl to survive? Where is your dignity? Where is your honor as the Witch of the Void? Have you forgotten your great ambitions in the past? By the way, Lady Immortal, regarding this plot, do you like it with a plot or do you like it without a plot?" The female immortal of the godly mountain showed a puzzled expression. Yulia nodded and said, "Okay, I will decide." Therefore, between being killed by Miss Maid in the future and being pecked to death by the blue bird now, she chose the former without hesitation. Namo Namo Namo. Chapter 2159. In the first scene, the little girl was suppressed in a cave covered with talismans. The little girl's hair was very long, and almost half of her body was immersed in the cold pool of water in the cave. Several chains were tied around the little girl's ankles. A black-haired boy appeared, and the boy lovingly picked up the little girl in the pool. She was a fairy sealed in this cave, and he was the next successor of the sealing family. Because of curiosity, he secretly ran into this cave without telling his family. This was the first time he met her. He came back every day and came to the little girl's side. Because he couldn't break the chains, he could only give the little girl a trace of warmth with his arms every time. Today, the little girl's fingers trembled as she touched the boy's lips. Their eyes met, and the distance between them unknowingly closed. The area below the neck was still empty for the time being. Senior sister, Yulia's brush stopped here, and she planned to properly think of the next scene, but at this time, the little fairy of the sacred mountain impatiently picked up the draft she had just drawn and looked at it. After a few glances, her face turned red, and after a few glances, she buried her head in the drawing paper. After a few glances, her small eyes seemed to be confused, and after a few glances, she was already dizzy. Little girl? Senior sister, Yulia, secretly chuckled and thought to herself, this is just the content above the neck. Wait until I take out the content below the neck, won't you have a nosebleed? She planned to complete a beautiful work, and had already thought of the next content. Just as Yulia picked up the brush again, she heard a dong sound. The little fairy of the sacred mountain knocked her head on the floor, and the originally dizzy little fairy actually lost consciousness at this time. Too exciting. Yulia couldn't help but blink her eyes. In fact, the real content hasn't been drawn yet? Should it be because this little fairy is too pure? Who cares? At this time, the little blue bird surrounded the fainted little fairy in a panic, as if it didn't care about its appearance at all. Yulia's eyes turned, and she quietly moved her, but little by little, she moved out of the room. Find the orange juice. After planting the carrot hero and defeating the bunny demon king, let's see what happens next. The rundown wooden temple on the sacred mountain was so small that it was pitiful. Yulia found what she needed in one of the few rooms. There was only one table in the room, and there was a bottle on it. What was written on the bottle was, orange-red juice. Yulia couldn't help but stare blankly. After hesitating for a while, she directly picked up the bottle. After seeing that nothing was wrong, she tentatively opened the bottle. Isn't this carrot juice? Senior sister, Yulia, had a strange expression on her face as she muttered, is it really that childish? Senior sister, Yulia, frowned. She didn't care so much anymore. She held the bottle and ran out. Unexpectedly, the little fairy on the sacred mountain had already woken up. She was angrily standing in the hallway, staring at her. That little blue bird was once again spinning around Armstrong. Yulia felt a dull pain in her head, especially in the area between her eyebrows. Little Blue! The little fairy on the sacred mountain angrily shouted. But this time, Yulia was prepared. She waved her hand, and a hidden drawing paper appeared. In the drawing, there was something below the neck that couldn't be described. The little fairy on the sacred mountain screamed, and her eyes seemed to be spinning. Then, she instantly fell to the ground, dizzy. Huff, 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 huff. Senior sister, Yulia, immediately ran away. She rushed out of the temple of the small wooden house in no time. However, she stopped in front of the temple. There was a problem. What if the carrot juice in the bottle wasn't real? Wouldn't she have to run to the sacred mountain again? Would it be better to try planting it here? Senior sister, Yulia, thought that she still had a few more drawings in her hand. Each one was more disgusting than the last, and it would probably be enough to make the little fairy faint a few more times. Thus, she calmed down a little. While thinking, Yulia ran back to the place where the little fairy on the sacred mountain had fainted. At this time, the little blue bird was looking at her with incomparable hostility. It looked as if it would crazily peck at her if she approached. Senior sister, Yulia, didn't dare to get too close to the little fairy. Instead, she considerately pasted some drawings on the walls and the floor. This way, once the little fairy woke up, she would be able to see the new drawings as soon as possible. The little blue bird was still looking at her with hostility, but it didn't seem to have any intention of stopping her. Yulia cautiously retreated. "Little Blue, I'm going back to continue drawing. I'm leaving, okay?" Dodge. Senior sister, Yulia casually found a piece of land and buried the hero seed that she had stolen from the village chief. Then, she directly poured the carrot juice in the bottle over it. Since she was hungry, she also broke off a carrot that always grew on a strange part of her body and took a few bites, as expected of a childish crayon world. Even though she was prepared for this, Yulia still couldn't help but open her mouth when she saw that the hero seed instantly took root and sprouted at a speed visible to the naked eye after she poured the carrot juice on it. Soon, the hero seed stopped growing. Seeing large leaves appear on the ground, Yulia hesitated for a moment and then directly reached out to pull it out. Without much effort, she pulled out a large carrot that was as tall as a person. This wasn't important, but this was life-threatening. At this time, Yulia trembled all over, and her expression was as if she had seen a ghost. She actually saw a face on the large carrot that was as tall as a person. Old boss? Senior sister. Yulia's legs instantly went soft, and she sat down on the ground saying in a panic, "Boss, listen to me, I didn't do it on purpose. I just wanted to protect myself. I didn't do anything so bad. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't draw it. Bah! I didn't draw it." However, the large carrot in front of her didn't move. Senior sister Yulia couldn't help but be dumbfounded. It was as if a person had put on a carrot cover, and only his hands, feet, and face were exposed. He looked like a tool that was handing out flyers on the street. Seeing that the boss of the big carrot didn't move and was standing there with his eyes closed, Yulia hesitated for a moment and then tentatively reached out to poke boss's cheek. As her finger got closer and closer, Yulia's voice rose to the extreme. "Poke the boss's face? Miss Maid, you probably haven't experienced it before, right? Poke." The moment she succeeded, Yulia took 2 steps back and even hid her hands behind her back. However, the carrot hero, or boss, still didn't have any reaction. Could it be that it was opened in the wrong way? Yulia couldn't help but frown. What kind of awakening method is needed, a spell or something? But why did the hero seed grow into boss? No, this Book of Gaia has something to do with the boss? Yulia opened her mind. I passed the first and second levels directly, not because the boss's portrait has divine power. Actually, this is the correct answer? But who is this little fairy? Is she related to the boss? Someone related to the boss, and even if the boss was the prototype of this kind of child's play world, Miss Maid wouldn't be able to do anything to her? Someone close to the boss? Yulia counted the people she knew who were close to the boss, and they were all females. Empress Dowager Rin? Obviously not. Chief Imperial Maid Lizzie of the Palace of Benevolent Peace? Obviously not. Lizzie was just a pendant of the Empress Dowager and wasn't qualified. As for the Empress of the Palace of Cunning, Miss Maid, how could it be? She wouldn't let anyone in. This is obviously a dark history, and she would be silenced if she knew. Who else could it be? Imperial Concubine Long. It can't be. If it was Imperial Concubine Long, this book would have been torn up by the Empress long ago. Who else could it be? The boss doesn't seem to have many concubines. They have a close relationship, and the Empress can't do anything about it. Could it be? Yulia blinked. She really thought of one. The boss's younger sister, who she had never officially met and only knew existed and slept every day. She walked to the front of the carrot hero, "Oh boss," again, looked at him a few more times, and clicked her tongue in wonder. However, the carrot hero suddenly opened his eyes. Yulia was stunned. Before she could react, the carrot hero directly stretched out his hands, lifted her up, and then shot her into the sky like a cannonball. The stars changed. The background was spinning crazily. However, when Yulia came back to her senses, she was already in front of the bunny demon's cave. She opened her mouth and saw the carrot hero rush into the cave without saying anything. In the blink of an eye, the carrot hero walked out again. This time, he had already grabbed the rabbit demon king by the ear and dragged him out. At this moment, the rabbit demon king was seeing stars and biting his tongue. He was even holding a small white flag. Senior sister, Yulia, didn't know what to say anymore. She could only watch this scene with her mouth agape. Boom! The bunny demon who was holding the white flag suddenly exploded into a puff of pink smoke and disappeared. At the same time, something seemed to slowly fall from the sky. It was golden, and it seemed to be a piece of paper? Yulia subconsciously reached out her hand to catch the golden paper. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly rushed in and coiled around the golden paper at a terrifying speed. Seeing that the thing she was about to obtain was about to be snatched away, how could senior sister, Yulia, just let it be? She instantly turned into a gray mist and sucked the golden paper into her body before the treasure snatcher could do anything. The treasure snatcher who suddenly barged in seemed a little surprised that the treasure snatcher didn't manage to snatch the treasure. Then, he suddenly stopped. Frowning, he looked at Yulia, who had regained her human form from the mist. It seems that a surprising person has sneaked into the Holy Maiden ceremony. You're not Yulia. Who are you? You're Hua-ing? Senior Yulia froze for a moment. Then, she glanced at the other party's bulging belly and asked in disbelief, "When did you get pregnant?" On the ground, Yulia and the treasure snatcher stared at each other for a moment. Suddenly, Yulia sneered. Holding the golden paper in her hand, she pondered for a moment and said, "So, it seems that your goal is this golden paper. Along the way I saw a lot of matchstick figures, and a lot of corpses. I think you used them to find the correct way up the mountain? Hand over the thing, and I'll let you suffer less. I can even let you go," the treasure snatcher, Hua-ing, said calmly, "otherwise don't blame me." Yulia shrugged. Then, she calmly folded the golden paper in her hand and stuffed it into her collar. "You asked for it," Hua-ing snorted coldly. Instantly, the sky became gloomy, and a terrifying cold current swept down from the sky. Yulia was shocked. This was magic damage, and even if she turned into mist, it wouldn't be of much use. Seeing that she was about to be frozen, Yulia became anxious. She wondered if she should hand over the thing to save her life. However, at this moment, an orange-red figure appeared in front of her. It was the carrot hero, boss. The expressionless carrot hero took out a big sword from somewhere. It was the godly sword that the matchstick figure duo Air had pulled out in the village that day. The godly sword broke through the cold current with one slash, but the second slash stabbed into the ground. Yulia froze for a moment. At this moment, 100-meter-long carrot sword fell from the sky and stabbed toward Hua-ing. Hua-ing's expression froze. After a cold snort, a golden book appeared in her palm. The pages of the book flipped wildly and blocked the falling sword. Although the giant sword was blocked, Hua-ing had been directly knocked into the ground at this time. She got up slightly awkwardly, only to see the same giant sword falling from the sky again at this time. Yulia immediately cursed, a second attack. What the F***ck? Hua-ing's expression changed drastically. Seeing the huge sword falling, it was too late for her to take out the golden book again. She even smelled the smell of death. As a god who had once been in charge of death, she was too familiar with this smell of death. Without time to think, Hua-ing gritted her teeth and turned into a stream of light, rushing into the golden book. At the last moment when the huge sword fell, the golden book disappeared into thin air. When the sword fell, the whole mountain disappeared. The power was too much. This combat power was seriously inconsistent with the style of the Crayon Kingdom. Yulia was still in shock. She saw the carrot hero boss, who had just beaten up the pregnant woman, Hua-ing with a big carrot stick, became a motionless carrot half inserted into the soil. This time, Yulia didn't dare to wake up this hero again. She only dared to watch from afar. She remembered the golden paper that Hua-ing wanted to snatch, so she quickly took it out from her collar and looked at it carefully. She saw words slowly appearing on the golden paper. She couldn't understand these words, but unexpectedly, she could understand their meaning. This is a diary? Eternal calendar, the 7th day of the mystic month, cloudy. Today, Brother Huang came to find me. Brother Huang is too much. He disguised himself as a big rabbit and said that he wanted to catch me and eat me. It's so scary. Brother is the best. He saved me from the hands of that bastard Huang Emperor. He even beat up Huang's imperial brother. Brother is the best. Haha. Brother also gave me a set of crayons and a new picture album. Humph. Brother Huang is too bad. If only Big Brother could beat him up again. He only knows how to scare me every day. He's so bad. Today is the day I like my brother the most. Chapter 2160. Eternal Calendar, Mystic Moon. Brother Emperor? Yulia looked at the golden page in her hand with a puzzled expression. Why is there only a calendar but no specific year? Why is there a 7th day of the month? Brother Emperor? There were only so many words on the golden page. Yulia waited for a long time, but there was no new information. In other words, the amount of information was just a few short sentences. It wasn't much, but it vaguely pointed to the boss's identity. Yulia didn't know if it would be inappropriate for a newcomer like her to know the boss's background so quickly. It's not a question of whether it's appropriate or not, but… Yulia sighed. She had already obtained this information. I have long known that there must be a lot of important and fatal secrets behind these treasures. If I want to live well, I should avoid these dangers. Yulia sighed again. Why can't I help it every time? She shook her head. She didn't know when a Hua-ing would snatch it again. Carrot Hero's second attack obviously didn't kill her. She had already escaped. Thinking of this, Yulia quickly folded the golden page and planned to put it in the most private part of her body. But at this moment, an inexplicable message broke into her sea of consciousness from the golden page. This is… Senior sister Yulia's expression froze. Can it be another world? Winter Kingdom, Ice Palace. A pale white cold light suddenly entered the palace. In this world of ice and snow, such a cold light was difficult to detect. At least, the people in the palace didn't notice at this time. Princess, what happened? At a post station with few people outside the palace walls, the bearded dwarf boss looked curiously at a girl beside him at this time. The girl was wearing a gray robe and covered most of her face with a hood. At this time, the girl looked thoughtfully in the direction of the palace. All the bearded dwarves looked at her at this time. The princess looked indifferent and said, "Nothing, I just saw a figure come back in a mess." Shadow? What kind of figure could there be? The bearded dwarves immediately looked around, but other than the passers-by, there were only the knights of the kingdom standing guard outside the city gates. These cavalrymen were clearly here for the princess who had committed treason. Not only were they guarding everywhere, they were also searching everywhere. Your Highness, there are too many cavalrymen in and out of the city. Let's wait until nightfall and see if we can sneak into the city, the bearded dwarf's second brother suggested. If you can think of it, then the cavalry should be able to think of it as well. The girl shook her head and walked up to the bearded dwarf. Can you run fast? Me? When second brother heard this, he subconsciously said, "Of course I'm fast. Among the 7 brothers, I'm the fastest." Then I'll have to trouble you. The girl nodded. The bearded dwarf couldn't help but stare blankly. While he was puzzled, he suddenly felt his body turn cold. A cold wind blew, but the robe he used to cover his body had been directly lifted by the girl at this time. "Your Highness." The bearded second brother couldn't help but show a confused expression. "Hurry up and run, the faster the better," the girl said calmly. The bearded dwarf subconsciously looked in the direction of his eldest brother, but saw that his eldest brother's expression suddenly changed, and he immediately shouted, "Run! They saw you!" Wah! The bearded dwarf finally realized what was going on. He saw that several fellows in the relay station who intended to enter the city were now looking at him. Someone had even taken out a wanted poster, as if comparing something. How could second brother not understand the princess's intentions now? But at this moment, the bearded dwarf said excitedly, "That's too despicable! So heartless! As expected of the princess we swore loyalty to. You even betrayed your own people. Princess, you will definitely succeed. I'll run first. Wait for me to come back." The girl's lips parted slightly, but she finally fell silent. After saying that, the bearded dwarf directly picked up a large wooden stick and rushed to the entrance of the city gate, and shouted loudly, immediately attracting the attention of the pedestrians on the road. The cavalrymen at the city gate also reacted, but the bearded dwarf, second brother, was still laughing and cursing at them. "Your Highness, let's go in now. Don't waste second brother's sacrifice," the bearded eldest brother said quickly. "Also, Your Highness, the next time you want to betray us, please be sure to tell us in advance so that we can be mentally prepared. The main reason is that we are afraid that our acting skills are not good enough. We will ruin your big plan." The girl's lips moved again and she fell silent again. How should she put it? Putting aside the external image problem, this group of bearded dwarves seemed to be unexpectedly loyal? Enter the city. A few strands of cold light slowly descended. Finally, the cold light converged into a figure on the throne. As soon as she sat down, her face turned pale instantly. She didn't know if it was because of the fetal movement or because of the injury. She stroked her chest and pursed her lip. After a long time, the Queen of Chilly Winter sighed slowly. "I didn't expect that page to actually." What she didn't expect was that when she came with the Book of Gaia, she was defeated. In the end, although she escaped with the help of the Book of Gaia, she was still seriously injured by a carrot. As expected of a special page, it's really dangerous. The Queen of Chilly Winter sighed slowly. Although the world of the Crayon Kingdom was incomparably childish, it was one of the few places where she had never been able to seize a page. Moreover, although the Crayon Kingdom was a little childish, the Guardian on the Sacred Mountain was extremely terrifying. In comparison, not to mention that she had never come into contact with the fairy of the Sacred Mountain in the Crayon Kingdom, just the giant in the first level of the Sacred Mountain was at the top of the pyramid in the inner world of the Book of Gaia. Has it started to move?" The Queen of Chilly Winter suddenly frowned. The Book of Gaia had the ability to lock on every page. At this time, under the lock of the Book of Gaia, the special page began to move toward the world of other pages. It could be said that the guy who pretended to be Yulia is moving. The Queen of Chilly Winter sneered. "It's fine if you stay in the Crayon Kingdom all the time. If you move, it will be a great help. Now I don't have to worry." With that said, a cold wind suddenly rolled up from the throne. The cold wind gathered under the throne as if something was slowly appearing. When the wind and snow dissipated, what appeared in the hall was a huge mirror. In the mirror there was an image of a blue bird. This was the magic mirror of the traitor princess, and now it was in the hands of the Queen of Chilly Winter. She looked at the demon blue bird that appeared in the magic mirror and was thinking about something. How could she, who had many pages, not know that there were a few characters that would inevitably appear in each page world? "Bluebird, I found it," the Queen of Chilly Winter said to herself at this time, "but the giant, the toad, and the Qingtian doll have not appeared yet. Sure enough, it's still because I haven't entered the timeline of this story. Do I really have to wait for this child to be born and for her to grow up? It's too long. This time, I don't have the patience. The Queen of Chilly Winter stroked her abdomen, and her eyes gradually became sharp. So, the Queen of Chilly Winter slowly said, "Mirror, mirror, who is the most beautiful person in this world?" The demon spirit in the mirror suddenly became lively at this time and quickly said, "Dear Queen, the most beautiful person in this world is your child who is about to be born. The princess as pure as snow. The world will sing her as Snow White." The Queen of Chilly Winter said indifferently, "What if I don't like her name?" The demon spirit said calmly, "The world will still sing her as Snow White. The name is just a symbol." Pure? The Queen of Chilly Winter suddenly sneered, "No, I will cultivate her into the evilest girl in the world." The demon spirit was silent, then hid in the mirror and never appeared again. The Queen of Chilly Winter didn't care. She only cared about the core page of this page world. As long as she followed the story of the page to the best, the page would appear. But there was another way. That was to destroy the plot. Completely destroying the original storyline of the page story would also make the page appear. Moreover, destroying the plot would be more efficient. In the Book of Gaia, in her hand, many pages were collected by destroying the plot. I need to prepare. Snow and ice appeared in the Chilly Winter Palace again. The gray snow had been falling continuously for a week. The world outside had been completely covered by the gray snow. At least, the ruined city that they were hiding in was like that. Fortunately, Mr. Z's food reserves were very sufficient. The main reason was that Mr. Taramaru could often hunt some small animals back, even though they didn't look good. Remia had already stayed in this sewer pipe with these strange travelers for a long time. She was familiar with most of the things that she should be familiar with, and she had also told them many stories that she should tell. If the snow doesn't stop, will we freeze to death here?" Remia couldn't help but ask worriedly. Since yesterday, Mr. Z had started to control the timing of the fire. It was probably because there was no more wood to be found nearby. Mr. Z still looked so calm. In his free time, he was reading a book. Remia was curious about what book he was reading. Once, she took it to take a look and found that it was a storybook. He used to turn this storybook over and over again. "I'm also thinking about this problem." Mr. Z thought for a moment and said, "Cats and I have encountered 2 consecutive months of snow, but that was because it was winter. Is it going to be winter soon?" Remia asked in surprise. Mr. Z shook his head and said, "It's been less than half a year since the last winter. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be. We didn't go to a cold place, so logically speaking, it shouldn't be like this. This snow is a little strange. But don't worry, we still have enough food. Tomorrow I'll go out to a farther place to find some useful supplies. If we can find fuel, we'll be more comfortable. When I went out yesterday, I found a heater. If I fix it, it should still be usable." Remia thought for a while and said, "I'll go with you. Although it's safe here, it's always stuffy here. I feel like I'm going to rust." Mr. Z nodded and then said, "Remia, come sit closer to me. It's too cold over there. Don't freeze yourself." Remia opened her mouth. She was indeed sitting a little far away. Although there was a fire, the chill on her back was still very strong. Then I'll come over." The girl nodded lightly and slowly moved to Mr. Z's side. "Much better. Just now it was a little cold." As she spoke, the young girl even sneezed and shivered. At this moment, something landed on the girl's body, and she was pulled into an embrace. Remia's mind went blank. Her ears were pressed against Mr. Z's chest. "Mr. Z. Mr. Z? I read in books that humans hug each other to keep warm." Mr. Z's gentle voice sounded in her ear. "Your body temperature is a little low. This is better. Will it be uncomfortable?" "No, no, no," Remia said subconsciously. She heard the crackling sound of burning wood, which was especially loud in this pipe. She also heard the sound of a heartbeat, her own heartbeat, which was equally loud and clear. In a daze, Remia felt that her body had unknowingly started to warm up. That comfortable and safe feeling made her feel lazy, and very soon she felt sleepy. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of her heartbeat gradually calmed down. Remia slowly closed her eyes. She felt like she couldn't hear Mr. Z's heartbeat. When they returned to the orphanage's dormitory, Sister Celia realized that there were barely any nurses in the dormitory. Instead, there were many strong flashlights in the garden. It seemed that the nurses had been sent out to search for the missing siblings. There was a benefit to this. She didn't have to explain Madanzo's situation to others. However, Madanzo was only 11 or 12 years old. Even if she was discovered, she could temporarily say that she was a child of the orphanage to cover it up. Although, she should be discovered soon. What are you doing? Looking for clues. Looking at the mysterious boy holding a magnifying glass and squatting on the ground, Sister Celia couldn't help but sigh. It would be strange if he could find clues like this. Something's wrong, Metatro suddenly said. Sister Celia was stunned. Just as she was about to speak, Madanzo had already stood up. She grabbed Sister Celia's wrist and pulled her to the bottom of the stairs. Madanzo even covered Celia's mouth. Then, she looked up. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Someone seemed to be walking down the stairs and talking. Sister Celia recognized the voice. She whispered in Madanzo's ear, "Director." Chapter 2161. At night, the lights in the corridor were switched on at intervals, so it was a little dim. The sound of leather shoes hitting the wooden banister came from the wooden stairs. She stopped halfway. It was the director of the orphanage. She seemed to be talking to someone. She was on the phone. Sister Selin held her breath and squeezed together with Madanzo, listening carefully. She was very nervous, but she looked at Madanzo with excitement. "Okay, I got it. I will find the 2 children as soon as possible. Don't worry. I will not delay the time of the delivery. I know the consequences." The voice of the headmistress was a typical old and bitter type. Celine had been working in this orphanage for a few weeks, and the headmistress had seen her several times. However, she did not dare to approach her several times. The voice gradually faded away. The director did not go down the stairs. Instead, she suddenly turned back and walked up the stairs. She left. Madanzo released her hand that was covering Selin's mouth. Selin's chest rose and fell a few times before she gradually exhaled. She said with lingering fear, "Director, you didn't notice, right?" "Let's not stay here first," Madanzo suddenly asked. "Do you know which floor the siblings are staying on?" Follow me," Sister Selin said quickly. The orphanage's dormitory building was very tall and big. It took them some time to reach the door of the back stairs of the destination floor. There are no guards patrolling outside, but there are 4 surveillance cameras in the corridor. Selin stuck her head out to take a look. Then, she turned back and said, Are we going to go in like this? Let me think about it." Madanzo sat on the ground and took a puff from the pipe from time to time. There was really smoke coming out. Selin did not dare to disturb her, but she kept recalling what the director said when she eavesdropped. She could not help but hesitate. Who do you think the director is talking to? And what does delivery mean? Did I hear wrongly? If you misheard, then I misheard as well." Madanzo casually replied. Celine opened her mouth and suddenly felt a chill. She subconsciously rubbed her arms. "Come, grab my ear," Madanzo suddenly said. Ouch, 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 I know I was wrong. How many times have I told you not to be naughty, but you still played pranks? Look, what's the matter?" In the monitoring room in the courtyard, 2 expressionless women were motionlessly observing the huge split screen in front of them. "Nothing special." "Yeah, maybe I'm being too sensitive. Let's look at the other places. We still haven't found the siblings. The principal is going to flip out." At this moment, the door to the control room opened and a person walked in. The 2 women who were watching the monitor turned around and their expressions changed slightly. They quickly stood up and said respectfully, Director? The principal didn't say anything. Her eyes quickly scanned the various cameras on the huge screen. Her gaze quickly locked onto a corridor. In the corridor, the young caretaker of the orphanage, Miss Serene, was pulling a child's ear and scolding him as she walked. This immediately attracted the attention of the curious children in the room. They tried to open the door and poke their heads out to peek, but they were quickly scolded back by the fierce Miss Serene. Go back to your room and reflect on your actions. Miss Serene came to a door, grabbed the child, and walked in. She then closed the door behind her. The children were in an 8-person dormitory with 4 bunk beds. When Miss Serene grabbed Madanzo's ear and walked in, the children in the room all looked at this scene in surprise. After closing the door, the newcomer Miss Serene immediately let go of the child who was grabbed by the ear. She seemed to be a little scared. This may be the most glorious moment of your life, Madanzo said with a faint smile. Even he didn't pull my ear. She didn't know who he was and only thought of him as a very important person? Miss Serene awkwardly wiped her palms on her clothes and immediately looked at the children in the room. The caretaker in the orphanage had a strong deterrent effect on the children. The children were a little scared and didn't know what to do. Miss Serene, what's the matter? A child who seemed to be the oldest among the children plucked up his courage and asked, Who is he? He doesn't seem to be from our room. Miss Serene and Madanzo looked at each other and calmed down. Miss Serene said, He's with me. We'll talk about him later. I'm here to ask you something, about little Ya and her brother. The oldest child's expression changed slightly. He didn't dare to look into Miss Selene's eyes. Didn't you come to ask a few times before? A few times. Miss Serene was stunned and subconsciously looked at Madanzo. Madanzo shrugged and said, We can think of it, but it doesn't mean that others can't think of it. I didn't think of it. Yes. The oldest child nodded. They came a few times and asked if little Ya came back. We would say that she hasn't come back yet and leave. Miss Serene nodded. Madanzo suddenly came closer and squinted at the oldest child. What did you say just now? You would say that? It sounds like you've discussed it beforehand. Did you know that someone would come to ask a few times? Ah. The oldest child panicked and quickly shook his head. No. Is there really nothing? Metatro leaned in closer. The oldest child didn't know why, but he seemed to be frightened. He sat on the ground and trembled. He looked very scared. Miss Serene couldn't stand it but didn't say anything. She also felt that the child seemed to be hiding something. I don't know anything. We don't know anything. Madanzo frowned and suddenly looked out of the window. Outside the window, something was knocking lightly. Hearing the knocking sound, the children in the room suddenly panicked. Miss Serene didn't say anything and walked directly to the window. However, the children in the room rushed to the window and blocked her. The oldest child even shouted, Run! Seeing this, Madanzo went to the side and opened the window when no one was paying attention. A panicked child's face popped out of the window. There was a child who was lying on the edge of the wall. When the window was suddenly opened, the child was shocked and couldn't stand still. It seemed that he was going to fall off the building. Everyone was shocked. At this moment, Sister Serene rushed out and grabbed the child's leg without hesitation. However, half of the nun's body was stuck in the window. Fortunately, she did not fall down. Hurry up and help me! Serene shouted. Metatro blinked and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. He helped and dragged the people back, including the child who was climbing the wall. This child wasn't little Ya, nor was he little Ya's brother. Say it. What's going on? Miss Serene looked sternly at the children who were standing in a row with their heads lowered, including the child who climbed the wall. When the child was rescued, he was still carrying a small basket in his hand. Miss Serene was very experienced in dealing with such situations. Seeing that the children didn't speak, she said directly, You know, children who lie and break the rules will be locked up and starved according to the rules of the school. It's okay if you don't say it. You can be punished together. Besides, I'll take you to see the principal later. We have to tell him about this. Don't take us to see the principal. The children's faces turned pale instantly. Then, they pushed the responsibility to each other as if they wanted to find someone who would take the initiative to tell the principal. In the end, the oldest child took all the responsibility and was elected by the others. This child also looked like he had nothing to lose. Okay, I'll say it. He went to send food to little Ya and the others. Outside the window, there was a rope made of clothes and bedsheets that reached the ground. Following this rope, the children, Miss Celine and Madanzo, slid down one by one. Miss Celine took a look. There were no surveillance cameras installed on the outer wall. She probably didn't expect these children to be so daring. Miss Celine, are you really not going to tell the principal? Take me to little Ya and the others, and I'll help you hide this matter. Miss Celine said impatiently. Do you know that this is very dangerous? What if you get hurt? Also, it's too dark outside. Little Ya and the others are hiding outside. What if an accident happens? Okay. The children had no choice but to nod. As they spoke, the child who climbed the wall led the way in front. He brought them to a small path in the park. However, the child's walking rhythm was a little strange. He walked and stopped. After a few steps, he would stop and walk in a very roundabout way. Miss Celine couldn't help but ask, "What's the matter with you?" The child who led the way was about to speak, but Madanzo suddenly said, "You're trying to avoid the surveillance cameras here, right? How do you know?" The child who led the way looked at Madanzo in surprise. He didn't remember when this child was in the compound. Madanzo said, "Compared to this, I'm more curious about how you found the pattern of the surveillance camera's blind spots." The child who led the way shook his head and said, "My brother told me." Miss Celine and Madanzo looked at each other. Miss Celine was puzzled and asked, "Brother?" "Little Ya's brother." The child who led the way said, "Brother is the smartest. He always gets first place in every exam. Even the oldest in the compound can't compare to him." Miss Celine frowned and subconsciously said, "Speaking of which, what's the name of little Ya's brother?" "Brother is brother?" The child who led the way said matter-of-factly. Then, he said, "Are you still going?" "Brother said that when we walk this path, we can't stop for too long. Otherwise, we'll make a mistake." Miss Celine could only be puzzled. She continued to move forward with Madanzo and the children. "You don't know the child's name?" Madanzo suddenly asked in a low voice. "I can't remember." Miss Celine shook her head. "Logically speaking, if he always gets first place in every exam, it's impossible for me to not remember him." Madanzo said, "So, there's actually no such brother?" "No." Miss Celine shook her head. "There is such a child. There is indeed a child. His grades are the best and he can do everything in sports. But the strange thing is, I really don't know his name. He exists, I know, but I don't know his name." Madanzo bit the pipe and muttered, "Concept? Interesting. Seems like we're getting close to the center of this world. We're here. It's right in front." The child who led the way suddenly pointed to the front. In front of them was a theater. "They're actually hiding in the theater?" Miss Celine was surprised. "Shouldn't this place have been searched?" The child who led the way said proudly, "The floor of the stage can be pried open. Adults can't squeeze in, but we can." Miss Celine shook her head. Just as she was about to speak, a few children suddenly rushed onto the stage and hid behind the curtains. "You guys?" Miss Celine quickly followed them. Just as she was about to pull the curtains, she felt that she stepped on something. It was a rope. Or rather, it was a rope made of a rope. The rope instantly tightened and wrapped around Miss Celine's ankle. At the same time, she lost her center of gravity. The rope was pulled up and she was pulled to the top of the stage. She was hung upside down. The dress did not have anti-gravity. It flipped down and almost covered her face. "It's blue." Backstage, the laughter of the children could be heard. Miss Celine was embarrassed and angry. She quickly pressed down on the dress and said angrily, "What are you doing? Let me go. Madanzo, come and help me. Madanzo? In her panic, Madanzo was no longer in Miss Celine's sight. At the same time, the curtains of the stage suddenly fell down. In an instant, the falling curtains covered the children who were hiding inside, making them look awkward. Miss Celine opened her mouth, but saw that Madanzo was already standing at the edge of the stage with a rope in his hand. I love to bully naughty children. Madanzo chuckled and walked to the back of the stage. Hey! Put me down! Miss Celine shouted from behind. A ray of light suddenly shot out and the rope that was hanging her broke. Miss Celine fell on the stage. At this moment, a pure white feather slowly floated down and finally landed on her head. There were many traps along the way, but Madanzo avoided them easily. In his opinion, these were all very simple traps. However, considering that these were all set up with local materials, it was surprising that he could achieve this level. He walked into a room on the stage where there were many dolls. The traps along the way are not bad, but this level is not enough. Madanzo walked among the dolls casually. Do you want to continue the game of hide and seek? I don't mind. After all, it's rare for me to move around. Just as he finished speaking, more than a dozen dolls fell from above Madanzo's head. He shook his head and dodged them all with gentle movements, almost without looking at them. However, at the moment when he dodged, a sharp object silently reached his throat in the dark. Madanzo's eyes focused and his body strangely stopped at this time. If he didn't stop, his throat would hit the sharp object directly. Everything seemed to have been planned out. Even the route of escape, was it also planned out? So, those prank-like traps in the beginning were all for the final trap? Madanzo slowly raised his hands and looked at the small figure in the dark. You are that brother? The small figure holding the sharp object in the dark remained motionless. Madanzo frowned. He suddenly reached out with his fingers and pinched the sharp object. Then, he pulled it gently. What he pulled out was only a doll. You can actually calculate to this extent? Madanzo shook his head. He felt that he had underestimated the other party. He casually threw away the sharp object in his hand, but found that he couldn't throw it away. There was actually a layer of glue on the object? While Metatro was still in shock, one of the fallen mannequins suddenly got up and hit the back of Metatro's head. Chapter 2162. It was the puppet's arm that was knocked off. The puppet's arm was made of wood, so it was obviously very lethal when it hit the skull directly. However, when the puppet's arm hit the back of Madanzo's head, it did not knock him down. He even stood still and took the hit. An ordinary person would probably fall down right away, right? Metatro slowly turned around and looked at the dummy in front of him. The dummy seemed to be in a daze due to shock. The person should be hiding in the dummy. But the puppet did not stay in a daze for long. The moment Madanzo turned around, it quickly pulled something. In an instant, something poured down from the top of the house again. It was a big pile of dust, like a waterfall. This is... Madanzo could not help but be startled. She seemed to have thought of what the puppet was going to do, so she frowned and said, Wait, don't be rash, I'll surrender at most. Listen, I know what you want to do, but the one who will get hurt is you. There's no need to fight like this, I mean no harm. The marionette didn't stop and quickly took out a round can. There was even a small gun nozzle tied to the mouth of the can. You'll let everyone know that you're hiding here. I said I surrender, okay? As she said, Madanzo quickly raised her hands. One of her hands was still stuck with the sharp object from before. It was a sharpened wooden thorn. The puppet stared at Madanzo motionlessly, but it did not intend to put down the simple device in its hand. Madanzo directly sighed and sat on the ground. She put her hands together and even closed her eyes. You can do whatever you want to me, okay? I said I mean no harm. The puppet still did not let down its guard, but at this time, it said in a low voice, I haven't seen you in the park. The voice was a little childish. It was the voice of a boy whose vocal cords had not begun to develop. Madanzo said calmly, There are so many children in the park, it's not strange that you haven't seen me. Besides, there's nothing special about me that's worth remembering. I know everyone in the park. Madanzo opened her eyes at this time and chuckled. I also recognize you. You are a brother, right? He was the most outstanding one among all the children. At your age, it's rare for you to be so meticulous. In fact, it's a little scary. Listen to my advice. Things like explosions are for adults to play with. It's better for children to play with sand happily. The dust floating in the air started to settle. At this time, Doll's finger was pressed on the ignition point of the simple device. When the dust content was lower, it was basically useless. You are someone from outside the park. In the end, the mannequin slowly put down the device. All right. Madanzo shrugged. I don't doubt your memory, so you're right. I don't belong to this place. How did you get in? The doll asked quickly. Madanzo smiled and said, You want to find a way out of the park through me, right? The mannequin was silent. You want to escape from this park with your sister, right? Madanzo asked further. The mannequin said in a low voice, Why do you want to escape? Madanzo couldn't help but scratch her head as if she was helpless. What a troublesome kid. I really don't like precocious brats. Why do you want to escape? The mannequin asked again. Madanzo sighed and said, If you just don't want to be separated from your sister, you wouldn't have to hide in this place and even set up so many traps. These traps can really kill a person. So, don't you think this action is a little too much? Then, I can only do this. Maybe you are a cold-blooded person, but considering that you are still young, no matter how cold-blooded you are, you wouldn't be indifferent to killing people, right? Although you were decisive and even a little cruel, I still want to believe that all the good in the world belongs to children. So, what are you guarding against? Against a terrifying enemy? The mannequin was silent once again. But this time, in the silence, the doll slowly took off the hood. Hidden inside the doll was a child with black hair and black eyes, who was no more than 11 or 12 years old. Madanzo blew the fringe in front of her forehead and chuckled. You look quite cute. You don't look like a child, the mannequin said suddenly. Madanzo asked curiously, Then what do I look like? The mannequin thought for a moment and said seriously, You should be the kind of person who is dozens of years old, but suffers from dwarfism or is born short and will never grow tall. Madanzo opened her mouth and smiled bitterly. If I didn't say that I will surrender, I would really like to beat up brats. At this moment, Sister Serene finally arrived at the room after stumbling all the way. She looked quite miserable. Her clothes were torn in many places, her body was dirty, and her hair was wet. She looked like a drowned rat. Obviously, the simple trap that Madanzo mentioned was not easy for this nun. So, you are here. I finally found you. Sister Serene, who barged into the room, held her knees and gasped for breath. This place is too dangerous. What are you doing? Madanzo shrugged and was about to stand up, but she realized that her pants were stuck to the floor. She looked at the mannequin in surprise. You even put glue on the floor? The mannequin was silent for a moment and said hesitantly, I didn't expect you to sit down. A normal person wouldn't sit down. Madanzo, I'm not a human? Madanzo walked out from the wall that was temporarily put together by the mannequins. He had changed into a new detective-plaid windbreaker, and he still had a pipe in his mouth. Sister Serene tried to hold back her laughter. She looked like she was trying to hold back her laughter. Madanzo was too lazy to respond. He looked at the mannequin that the children were talking about. He seemed to be thinking about something. However, Sister Serene frowned and said, Why are you hiding in this place? All the caretakers in the park are looking for you. Everyone is worried about you. The mannequin shook his head. We can't go back. Sister Serene said, Is it because little Ya is going to be adopted? I understand that you don't want to be separated, but you don't have to use this method. It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to stay, the mannequin said suddenly. Sister Celine looked at Madanzo in confusion, but Madanzo suddenly said, "Sell the goods." The mannequin's expression slightly changed, and his eyes became sharp. Madanzo waved his hand and said, "Don't be nervous. Don't tell me that you have other traps. I'm a little scared. I eavesdropped on what you said just now. Of course, maybe you can tell me what sell the goods means. The real reason why you are willing to do this." The mannequin was silent for a moment, and then he shook his head and said, "I don't trust you." Madanzo pointed at himself and chuckled, "You should trust me. Only then can I help you. Only by trusting me can I become your hope and strength." Just as Sister Celine was about to say something, she heard a flurry of footsteps coming from outside. The children who were covered by the curtains of the stage had caught up with them. "Littleya, perhaps it's okay to tell them," the oldest child quickly said. "Just now, Ah Wang fell from the window, but Miss Celine rushed out to save him without thinking. She almost fell down. She's really a good person." "Yes, it's true, Xiaoya, brother." The child who led the way, Ah Wang, nodded. "I almost fell off the building." The mannequin was silent. After a while, he walked to the side and leaned against the wall. Seeing this, Ah Wang, who was leading the way, heaved a sigh of relief. He walked up to Sister Celine and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Celine. I used a trap to tie you up. I didn't see anything." "This child has grown up." Sister Celine smiled bitterly, but she couldn't get angry. She gently rubbed Ah Wang's head and said, "Okay, I forgive you and all of you. Now, tell me what's going on with all of you, right?" Ah Wang and the other children looked at each other, then Ah Wang lowered his voice and said, "We think that the children we adopted from the park are not really adopted. What do you think?" Sister Celine frowned. "What's the matter?" Ah Wang looked at the mannequin and then slowly pulled up his sleeve. There was a black number printed on the inner side of Ah Wang's arm. The other children also pulled up their sleeve. Sister Celine noticed that these children all had the same number on their clothes. She grabbed their arms and looked at them carefully. "Why is there a number? I didn't notice it." Ah Wang said, "Miss Celine, you have only been here for 2 to 3 weeks. There are many things that you don't know. If you stay here for a long time, you will slowly learn about them. Then, you will become like the other nurses." Sister Celine had a dubious look on her face. Ah Wang quickly glanced at the older kid and nodded with his chin. The older kid understood and quickly ran to a corner. He lifted a wooden board and took something out from under it. It seemed to be a radio. Little Ya's mannequin made this secretly. Ah Wang skillfully turned on the radio and adjusted the channel. "You'll receive some messages that you won't know in the park." Sister Celine looked at Little Ya's mannequin in surprise. This child seems to be only 11 or 12 years old. The sound was not clear and there was even a lot of static. However, it was not difficult to hear what the announcer was saying. Sister Celine felt as if she was listening to a ghost story. Something like a large part of the human territory had fallen. Something like overthrowing the rule of the evil spirit. Something like calling for the people in the occupied areas to fight for freedom, to rush out of the occupied areas and go to the last pure land of mankind. Something like the evil spirits would not only eat humans but also cultivate human newborns into biological weapons on the battlefield. The channel that Ah Wang had switched on was almost constantly repeating the same message. She wanted to listen more carefully, but Madanzo had pressed the stop button and suddenly asked, "How do you know that the content on the radio is not fake?" Ah Wang asked in confusion. "Little Ya's mannequin said that you are from outside the park. Don't you know that?" Madanzo replied coolly, "I am not from the park, but I am also not from outside the park." Ah Wang and the other children revealed looks of confusion. Little Ya's mannequin knitted his brows but did not say anything. The oldest child said, "Actually, there are many things that are very strange. For example, there are so many surveillance systems in the park. For example, there are frequent physical examinations. We don't know what a normal orphanage is like. However, we feel that it is strange to have a comprehensive physical examination every half a month. Madanzo turned to look at Sister Selene. The nun shook her head and said, "A few days ago there was indeed a physical examination, but I didn't know that it was so frequent. I thought it was just a coincidence." Madanzo shook her head again and said, "Although it is strange, it is not enough to prove anything. They did not teach us anything about human history," little Yasmanikin suddenly said. "They only teach us general knowledge. They don't teach us about countries, provinces, regional knowledge." Madanzo blinked. "If they only teach us general knowledge, how did you learn those strange knowledge?" "From the library," little Yasmanikin said straightforwardly. "There are many books about scientific production. However, there are no names on them. They are simply stored as knowledge. I could not find any information about human history." "Is that so?" Madanzo held the pipe in his mouth, and puffed out some smoke from time to time. The children had never seen this thing before. They stared at him curiously. Suddenly, Madanzo knitted his brows. "It seems that someone is hiding. I can hear a nervous heartbeat. It is in this direction." He pointed with the pipe in the direction of little Yasmanikin. Little Yasmanikin frowned. He seemed to be doubting whether a human's hearing could really hear a heartbeat. After a moment of silence, he suddenly reached out his hand and knocked on the wall rhythmically. He said softly, "Little Ya, come out. It should be safe for now." Finally, Sister Selene saw the little girl who had been missing for so long. The little girl was hugging a toad doll tightly. She was about 8 or 9 years old. Her body was slimmer than her peers. However, her hair was very long and her complexion was pale. After the little girl came out, she stuck close to her mannequin. Her small hand gently pulled on her mannequin's sleeve. Her mannequin looked at Madanzo. "The exchange of information is over. It is your turn, the way out." Madanzo squinted his eyes and smiled. "I flew in. You can fly out." Little Guy. Chapter 2163. First of all, Sister Selene was willing to believe in her child. Secondly, this orphanage was very unusual. But to jump from a seemingly peaceful orphanage to a situation where the world was plunged into a huge crisis in an instant, Miss Nunn found it really hard to adapt. One had to know that she had just jumped into this strange world from the Freedom City. Not long ago. "You don't have to be afraid. At least, I won't hurt you." Selene was good at taking care of the children's emotions. The only one who needed to be comforted was the youngest little Ya. Even if her big brother was by her side, she would still feel uneasy, right? At this moment, Madanzo said again, "Wait, there's another sound." "I heard it too." Sister Selene was startled. "It sounds like a bell." Little Ya, big brother, said, "Someone is approaching here. This is the bell of the warning device that I set up, and there should be more than one." Sister Selene said instinctively, "Warning device? But why didn't it trigger when we came here?" Little Ya, big brother, said calmly, "You followed Ah Wong here. As long as you follow the route that I gave you, you won't trigger it. They should be here soon." Sister Selene didn't know what to say. Little Ya, big brother, didn't look older than the other children, but he had the calmness of an adult. "Little Ya, big brother, what should we do now? Can't we escape?" Ah Wong asked anxiously. Little Ya, big brother, said calmly, "We can only move to the next place. There should be enough time. But considering the coincidence of their arrival, I suspect that your operation has been discovered. They followed you here." This. Sister Selene seemed to want to explain something. "I agree with this point." Madanzo nodded. "The people outside most likely discovered our whereabouts and followed us here. So, what do you plan to do?" Little Ya, big brother, said expressionlessly, "If it's necessary, I can only take action." "If it's necessary, is there any other way?" Madanzo's expression changed slightly. She smiled and said, "I hope it's not necessary. Of course, there might be a better way." "What idea do you have?" Xiao Ya's brother asked directly. That will depend on her. Madanzo looked at Sister Serene. Me? She pointed at herself in shock. There were at least 7 figures when they entered the door. One of them was the director of the orphanage, an elderly woman who gave off a rather mean vibe. Let's split up and search. They might be hiding in some corner. Everyone nodded and was about to disperse. But at that moment, Sister Serene walked out from the back of the stage and stood in front of it. Director? When she saw the principal and the nurses, Sister Serene asked in shock, Why are you all here? Oh, it's Miss Serene. We've been looking for the 2 missing children in the park. It seems that we heard some commotion coming from here, so we came to take a look. I see. Sister Serene nodded. Then, she shook her head and said, But I've searched everywhere, but I still can't find them. The director said indifferently, Maybe you didn't look carefully. Besides, the 2 children are small. It's hard to find them even if they hide. Since we have to look for them anyway, it's not a big deal to look for them one more time. Sister Serene nodded. Actually, that's what I thought too. When I came here, I found some food scrap. The 2 children might be hiding somewhere. It's hard for me to find them. Otherwise, they might have left earlier. So, I wanted to get some people to come here and take a closer look. Director, it's great that you can come here. The director looked at Sister Serene in surprise. Then, she nodded to the nurses beside her. The nurses split into 2 groups and went deep into the theater. Sister Celia walked down from the stage and came to the principal's side. Those 2 children are too stubborn. I don't know if they will encounter any danger. The director said indifferently, If there's an accident, it will cause a big commotion. We can even find them faster. There's no commotion now. It seems that they're safe. Sister Serene started chatting with the director. After a while, the nurses who went to search came back one by one. They didn't bring back any useful information. However, they found some food scraps and brought them back. Maybe Miss Serene is right. They've moved away long ago. The director muttered, They shouldn't have gone far. Maybe they're nearby. Let's look around. Director, I'll go too, Sister Serene said quickly. The director didn't say anything. He simply nodded and soon left the theater with everyone, including Celia, a new employee who hadn't been employed for a long time. There was no commotion in front of the stage for a long time. At this moment, a piece of floor in the middle of the stage slowly opened and moved. Then, Madanzo stuck her head out. After looking around, she climbed out agilely. Okay, you guys come out too. They won't come here for a while. The children started to climb out from the mezzanine of the stage. Great, we've fooled the director. I was scared to death. I thought the director was going to find us. I didn't even dare to breathe hard. Thank you, Madanzo. It's nothing. Madanzo smiled casually. It's easy for people to overlook the things in front of them. It's not always better to be hidden. Sometimes, the more obvious things are, the easier it is for people to miss them. The children didn't quite understand. Madanzo didn't expect them to understand it immediately. Only Xiao Ye's brother said thoughtfully, The composition of lies is truth and falsehood. Lies with truth are often more likely to confuse people. Wait, don't learn it! Madanzo suddenly screamed. You can learn anything, but don't learn to deceive people. Xiao Ye's brother ignored her. He just bent down and put his hand into the mezzanine, trying to pull out Xiao Ye who was hiding in the innermost part. But Xiao Ye didn't respond in the mezzanine. Xiao Ye's brother couldn't help but frown. Then he seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed slightly, and he jumped into the mezzanine again. Madanzo felt a little strange. Then she climbed into the mezzanine again. Before she went down, she turned around and told Ah Wang and the other children, You guys go and see if the director and the others will come back. Okay. The mezzanine was only 1/3 of the size of the stage. But for the small children, the space was undoubtedly quite spacious. The existence of the mezzanine was probably designed to increase the effect of the stage. When Madanzo walked into the mezzanine again, she saw Xiao Ya's brother squatting aside silently, holding a light stick in his hand. Xiao Ya was lying on the ground, writing or painting something on the deck with chalk. Madanzo went forward and saw Xiao Ya's brother make a gesture of silence. Madanzo nodded, but he looked at what Xiao Ya was painting on the ground in confusion. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes, because he found that even with his knowledge, he couldn't understand it immediately. It seemed to be something like a formula, and some kind of drawing, but the drawing was obviously not complete. It was probably just a small part. At this time, Xiao Ya's brother was staring at it attentively. His lips would tremble from time to time, as if he was reciting it. Another strange thing was that Xiao Ya's state was not normal. Xiao Ya seemed to not know what she was doing. After a while, Xiao Ya suddenly stopped. Her little hand loosened, and the chalk fell to the ground. She closed her eyes and was about to fall down. Xiao Ya's brother immediately supported her. After putting her down, he quickly used his sleeves to wipe away the things on the ground. Metatro blinked and asked coldly, "You've memorized it all?" "Yes." Xiao Ya's brother nodded. Then he frowned and looked at Madanzo with a sharp gaze. Madanzo blinked and then said seriously, "You know, generally speaking, in such a situation, it's easy to get some information from others. This is called catching them off guard. Are you a loser?" Xiao Ya's brother was silent for a moment. He thought for a while and said, "Okay, I remember it. Thank you." Madanzo said again, "Xiao Ya, she should have done this more than once, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be so calm. You even memorized what she wrote." "What do you want to ask?" Xiao Ya's brother was more direct. "What did she write down?" Madanzo didn't beat around the bush. Xiao Ya's brother thought for a while and said, "I don't know. I don't even know why Xiao Ya wrote these things. Since she was very young, she would occasionally do this. In the beginning, I didn't pay attention to it. Until one time, I found some of the things she wrote down. I could understand a part of the formula, so I memorized it. Later on, the more she wrote, the more I memorized. Some of them can be used, some. I can't do it for the time being. At least, in my environment, I don't have the conditions to do it." Madanzo frowned and said, "Then, does Xiao Ya know about this?" Xiao Ya's brother said, "She will have some vague memories. But, I know that this knowledge is not hers. She said that she heard it." "Heard?" "I call it whisper for the time being. Xiao Ya can hear it because she is listener." Xiao Ya's brother nodded. Then, he picked up Xiao Ya and walked toward the exit of the mezzanine. He said in a low voice, "Don't tell a Wang and the others about this, lest they worry." "Then, why did you tell me?" Madanzo asked curiously. "You are an adult. It shouldn't be a problem," Xiao Ya's brother said seriously. Looking at the back of this little brat, Madame Madanzo really wanted to say, "He did not have dwarfism. He was not born short, it shouldn't be a problem?" Madanzo muttered, "Is it because it doesn't matter even if he knows, or, as expected, it is hard to deal with precocious little brats?" Xiao Ya's brother said the same thing as Madanzo. He told Wang and the others not to leave the theater for the time being. However, he needed to rearrange the security equipment. As for Xiao Ya's brother, he put Xiao Ya down beside him. Then, he picked up the radio and dismantled it. "What are you doing?" Madanzo asked curiously. Without raising his head, Xiao Ya's brother said, "I just figured out something. So, I need to reassemble it. Perhaps I can improve the radio's performance. There is too little information on the outside. I need more." Madanzo's eyes turned and she suddenly said, "Because of the formulas you saw earlier?" "Yes." "Okay, I'll help." Madanzo sat down directly. Xiao Ya's brother showed a surprised expression and asked subconsciously, "You also understood it?" Madanzo shook her head. "They may recognize me, but I obviously don't know them." "Help? Help wipe the sweat." Madanzo showed a bright smile. "I can also pour water. Boss, do you want a full body massage? I'm good at it." "You're welcome." Madanzo didn't care. She sat beside him with her chin in her hands and watched with a smile. Oh, wah wah wah. Ah dash. In the sky, a figure was chasing after them. Seeing that she was about to make the most intimate contact with the ground, her screams became more and more harsh. Oh wah, help. Do you think I can fly? She stopped a few meters above the ground. Her body was in a magical state of condensation. Senior sister Yulia. She landed on the ground. Where am I? After landing on the ground, senior sister Yulia looked around and also checked her own body. Suddenly, she burst into tears. Her style finally returned to normal. She was no longer the playful girl from the Crayon Kingdom. Senior sister, Yulia, was so touched that she put her hands in front of her chest a few times, feeling the light weight in front of her chest. Then, she revealed a dissatisfied expression. It's okay. It's the original appearance. She looked around again. It should be nighttime, but she didn't know if it was early or late at night. The sky was unusually gloomy, and there were no stars. However, the city in front of her was in ruins. There were traces of destruction everywhere. Buildings collapsed and roads cracked. Even the three pests were rare. Senior sister, Yulia, stood alone on this strange and dilapidated street, and she couldn't help but have an ominous feeling. Suddenly, the surroundings became even darker. Senior sister, Yulia, froze for a moment, only to see a huge black shadow looming over her body. She looked up and saw an even bigger black shadow. Boom! With a loud noise, the huge black shadow dropped something and crashed into her body. Senior sister Yulia instantly turned into mist and rolled forward. She stopped on a street lamp in front of her and condensed her body again. In front of her was a spider that looked like a living creature but was made of a large amount of metal. What was even stranger was that she even saw a person on the head of this half-living, half-metal spider. To be precise, it was a child. A child whose lower body was completely merged with the spider's head. The rest of the body was connected to the spider's head by fine red vein-like things.